is the Mayor, and this meeting is being held in accordance with government regulations on holding virtual meetings. At the outset, I would ask councillors, as normal, to only unmute their microphone when they are addressing the meeting. And likewise, to save bandwidth, I would ask the councillors only to switch on their cameras when speaking and remember to switch them off when they've finished. If councillors wish to speak on a particular item and have not been called to speak, please indicate by typing the letter Q in the conversation column or by drawing my attention to it. I have to say, though, I may not, as always, get through round to every speaker who wishes to speak, but I will do my best to be fair and try and involve everybody. So please do not use a conversation column for any other comments, as they can be seen by all participants and are retained as part of the meeting. And to assist your fellow councillors, officers and members of the public watching, can you identify yourself by stating your name when you speak? You should also indicate if you need to leave the meeting at any point. On June the 17th, 72 of our residents tragically lost their lives in the Grenfell Tower fire. So I would now, as always, please ask every member of the council to pay our deepest and continuing respect in the conventional manner by marking the moment with 72 seconds silence now. Thank you. And again, at this time, I'm sure that I speak for the whole council in expressing our sincerest condolences to each and every member of our Kensington and Chelsea community who has lost family members, neighbours, friends or colleagues to this coronavirus pandemic. Members will also be very saddened to have learnt of the passing of Honorary Alderman Christopher Buckmaster on the 2nd of November and former Mayor Brian Levitt on the 10th of November. This year we have lost Honorary Alderman Tony Holt on the 26th of February, Francis Taylor on the 25th of June, and I hope that we can pay tribute to them and to David Campion, who we lost on the 18th of August, at a time when their memorial services happen. That hasn't happened so far, but I hope also that when we can invite people into the Mayor's Parlour, I will invite the relatives and councillors who wish to express their tributes to them. So the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Council held on the 21st of October have been circulated. I shall take these as read and confirm them as a correct record, unless anybody has a point of accuracy to raise. If so, can you raise it now? Thank you. I shall take those as a true record and duly sign them. Thank you. I shall now ask the Chief Executive to report any apologies for absence or lateness from this virtual meeting.
Councillor Bakhtiar.
Councillor Bakhtiar. I have no other apologies. Do we know of any other apologies or lateness? Thank you. I shall now read out a list of members to ascertain attendance at this meeting. Members are reminded that for the meeting to be quorate, we must have at least 13 councillors present at all times. So as usual, I shall go through the roll call as swiftly as possible. Please remember just to switch on your microphone and say here when your name is called and switch off as soon as you've answered. Councillor Addenbrook.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dorian.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ali.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Oretti.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Atkinson.
Present, sir.
Thank you. Councillor Bakhtiar, absent. Apologies. Councillor Bennett.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Beryl Cox.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Blakeman. Councillor Blakeman. Councillor Campbell.
Sorry, I was having trouble unmuting it. I'm present.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Present.
Councillor Chowan.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Siren.
I'm here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dent Code.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nagy.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Evans.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Folkes.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Freeman. Councillor Freeman. Councillor Hammond.
Here, Mr. Mayor, and I did see Councillor Freeman earlier.
Okay. Councillor Healy.
Now, Robert Freeman, I am here.
Thank you. Councillor Healy.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Husband.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Idris.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jackson.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kamali.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lowry.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lindsay.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Marshall.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mason.
Present.
Councillor McVeigh.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mills.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nile.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor O'Connor.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Palmer.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pascal.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Press.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Rendell.
Yes, here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Rossi.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Round.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Smetling.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Spalding.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thalasitis.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thaxter. Councillor Thaxter.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wilson.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wheel.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Will.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening. Councillor Williams.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Woodger.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And I would advise councillors they are present in a meeting and so they should observe the rules of behaviour set out in the Members' Code of Conduct. Councillors also are reminded to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest in any matter before the council this evening and to leave the meeting such as a matter is considered. Are there any such declarations? Thank you. So we move now to public contributions. This evening, we will be devoting up to an hour for public contributions. These contributions were invited via the council's website. I will read the submissions, then ask the lead member to respond, and then the spokesperson for the minority party will also be given an opportunity to respond. So we move to the first question from Richard Ballarand. What are the council's plan to ensure any beneficial changes emerging from the royal boroughs during the COVID crisis are carried forward into actionable policies when we eventually progress out of it? So who from the leadership team would like to answer that, please?
That would be me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ballarand. It's a really apposite question because a COVID-19 recovery report is going to come to our leadership team next Wednesday. And in it, it sets out our proposals about how we're going to continue to address the impact of COVID-19 in the borough and how we propose to support our residents going forward. So what we hope to do next week is adopt an approach that recognises that it's going to be gradual. It's got to be based on evidence and the aspirations of our communities. And we've already been working with partners, communities, residents to better understand their experiences and to use them to help us shape the response. And we're going to continue listening to them. So, you know, the council's response to recovery is really going to be driven by our local residents, and response and recovery are likely to run in parallel for some time to come. And it will mean that we need to take some short, medium and long-term actions, starting right now with the national effort in reducing COVID's immediate risks through to reducing long-term health and economic inequality and building on opportunities. Now, the COVID-19 report is actually published on our website, and so you can find it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And who would like to speak from the opposition?
I would, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dentcode.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm really pleased that Mr. Ballarand has come forward with this question. He was actually asking about beneficial changes, and for me the key word is actionable and very apposite. You know, the council has some brilliant policies, many of which are gathering dust on shelves or lost in a cloud somewhere. And I feel there's very little monitoring with what targets we have. Environmental policy is definitely huge. It takes a lead right now, I would say. We are one of the worst councils in the country for recycling rates. Our response to calls for traffic calming are notoriously slow and rarely enforced. People, you know, we have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit around here. I can hear cars driving about 50 miles an hour around here. There is no enforcement, very little signage. We really need to look at what other boroughs are doing and look at good practice. And the same goes for encouraging safe cycling by the installation of good, safe cycle routes, working with local businesses and stakeholders. We need to do better. But for a moment, I'd like to look at planning matters and specifically Wannington Green. The plans currently on the table are well over 10 years old. And by the time this is built, if it ever is, it could be 2025, 18 to 20 years after it was conceived, in a different economic situation, pre-Brexit, pre-Grenfell, pre-climate emergency and pre-COVID. The world has changed, and yet this outdated plan has not, as have many things that need updating. 42 well-loved, mature, life-giving trees are to be destroyed to be replaced by bland, featureless tower and various other buildings of absolutely no character whatever.
Councillor Dentcode, can I ask you please to address the question specifically?
I am. The beneficial changes, this is what I'm saying, that we need to plan for these beneficial changes. We need to look to reviewing how we do these things post-COVID. So I'm saying we need to reset our priorities and encourage landlords to do the same, because everything has changed. Our lives, working practice, how we shop, meet and socialise have changed, many of them for the better. And we need to commit to actionable policy change to work with, not against, our changing world. So I do think there's a lot of work to be done, and we have to accept change and all our planning issues, absolutely, and look at how people are functioning differently and often better. Thank you.
Thank you. Second question then is from Leopold Roof. What steps is the local council taking to aid struggling local businesses throughout the latest lockdown? And has the council taken action with regard to unequal allocation of funds for struggling businesses within Kensington and Chelsea relative to the rest of the UK? Who's going to answer that for the leadership team?
I will, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Hello, councillor folks here. Thank you very much for your question, Leopold. I think it's a really important question. From the very start of the COVID emergency, it's been one of the council's priorities to make sure that we support businesses and that we get out the financial support to them as quickly as possible. So far, this has been a total of £263 million which has supported over 4,000 businesses. So during the national restrictions in place for November, the Council has prepared new processes to provide the grants payment to those businesses required to close. And indeed, those businesses that have also been covered by the Tier 2 restrictions that were before the lockdown and after the lockdown. And these payments are made dependent on the rateable value of the businesses, and the highest level is for £3,000. These are now live on the Council website, so do please go and have a look at those. But in addition to those grants, which will total about 8 million, the Council has received a sum of money to support businesses that have been also affected. And this is called the Additional Restricted Grant Scheme that I will refer to as the ARG. And this is a further £3,000 that will be allocated to businesses who have not been entitled to other government support, and who are aligned to impacted businesses or venues that are in the government guidance. So our criteria for giving grants out under this scheme will be for those that have the challenge of paying high fixed costs in employee costs, and have not been able to trade online, or to be able to have some other impact. This has had severe impact on their income. But your reference to the allocation of the fund, I completely agree. While we absolutely welcome the £20 per head that has contributed towards the 3 million that's in the ARG scheme, I do agree that the methodology of this is a bit odd, because it equates it doesn't recognise that boroughs like ours, that has a very small number of residents and a very large number of people, really miss out on this. So, for example, RBKC will be receiving the 5th lowest grant at £229 per business, compared to Blaenau in Gwent, which is receiving £1,140 per business, because they have a very low number of businesses and a high number of population. So I have added my voice along with other London boroughs to say that this formula does not work for London. We collect the largest number of business rates, and we would like to see more grants coming to our very valuable businesses, which really are the engine room for the whole of this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to answer from the opposition?
Perhaps I'll take that, Mr. Mayor. Well,
okay.
Of course, the unequal, Councillor Mason, Councillor Mason. Of course, the unequal allocation of funds that Councillor Fox mentioned, of course, is something that we've all been commensurate with our ability to climb the chain, been banging on about at the London councils, the local government association meetings, and all the way up, basically, because our businesses here are in as much need as anywhere in the country, because of course we have some of the highest land values, some of the highest lease costs, and there are businesses on a straw poll. I was walking around during both lockdowns. There are some businesses who were not only unable to access some of these grants, but they were not able to access furlough. They were not able to access other grants such as that, because of they needed to put in accounts that they didn't have or were not completed, etc. And it's the grants that they did get. The 3 or 5K grant at the beginning, many of them told me when I said, "Did you get these grants? Did you get these grants?" They said, "Yes," but it only meant that we were able to stand still and survive, even if the business rates were suspended for a year. And of course, there are quite a lot of empty shops across the borough, in the north of the borough, Kensington High Street, or wherever you go. The small businesses in particular were hit because they have got less clout and less cash and are able to buy. They're unable to buy macroeconomic amounts of goods that the large stores can, and a lot of those large stores, of course, have small businesses at a disadvantage right away because they pay little or no income tax, whilst the small businesses are clobbered with the full rate of taxes. So I think it's a fairly unfair system where businesses that are closed and our streets were empty, just the same as they were in Wales or in Scotland or the north of England. I've no idea why governments keep coming up with calculations, and it happens over the decades, no matter what government's in office, come up with calculations that disbenefit a whole range of businesses, and of course it's employment as well. If businesses go out of business, then if workers are on furlough, then of course they're unemployed, and the unemployment rate has gone up by something like, well, about 300,000, I believe, more people in the last 4 months. So we're all fighting to try and keep our businesses in place. And lockdown means, of course, no customers, little customers, few customers, and small businesses are suffering the most. So I agree. It's something that we are all banging on about. We know how desperate that is. Many of us have been through the 2008-9 crisis.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
So yes, I just want to point out that that we are all trying to do our bit in what's a huge economic crisis.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I now have 3 questions that are all of the same topic, which is a cycle lane on High Street, Kensington. So I plan to take those 3 questions together. I'll read all 3 out, and then ask for the answers to be about those 3 questions from both sides of the chamber. So the first question is from Justin Abbott. Other than High Street, Kensington, RBKC has 0 self-protected cycle lanes on its 207 kilometres of roads. Government and TfL policy follows established global practice for the safe, protected cycle lanes and are an essential part of the transport network for such roads. RBKC has consistently blocked safety lanes in the past. There is always an excuse. The scheme demonstrably works by RBKC's own data. Cycling has doubled. Not a shred of evidence as opposed to opinion has been presented to support its removal. It is an incomplete trial period. 126 KSIs in 2018. Stakeholders like Imperial College are ignored. Users are not even asked. How can RBKC begin to think this is acceptable? The next question on the same topic is by George Morgan. What criteria was the Kensington High Street bike lane being assessed by? Explain how it failed to meet these and identify what data was used. Why was the decision taken so swiftly? And the third question on this topic is from Julia Huff. Can you please tell us which constituencies you've consulted when you are now considering closing the bicycle lane on High Street, Kensington? And what form those consultations have taken? Also, I'd like to know the number of emails and petitions for and against the lanes as of today. So in answering those, I'm quite happy to give you the speakers a couple more minutes of that, up to 4 minutes to reply to those 3 questions together on the same topic.
Mr. Mayor, sorry to interrupt. There's also question 7 on the same topic, I believe.
Well, but it's not a question, and we haven't had the information on that.
I think we ought to read it out in the interests of transparency.
Okay, well, we've had a comment from Mr. Barry Monday, who stated that he wishes to comment on the temporary cycle lane schemes in Kensington High Street and future plans. We've tried to. Oh, we've got it now. I beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon. Sorry. So let me read it then. Firstly, I would like to thank the council and Councillor Thalasides in particular for calling a halt to the temporary lanes in Kensington High Street. This cannot have been an easy decision in view of the strongly held views on either side. ESSA understands the council was under great pressure to do something quickly, and we were given assurances that the proposals were temporary and would be removed should they be seen to be causing problems of congestion or rat running. As we know, both of these problems have been very evident during normal traffic conditions. Most of our residents have said that they are not anti-cyclist, and many of them are cyclists themselves. However, they have suffered real disruption in their daily lives. They will be pleased to see a cycle route which is safe and does not cause unnecessary traffic problems. Could the council explain next steps towards finding an alternative solution? Secondly, the problems have been made worse by the 5 major construction sites running concurrently on the high street, plus major works to utilities. Could the council come forward with proposals for better coordination and management of major works affecting the high streets? So that has come in from Mr. Munday this afternoon, and those are the 4 contributions from the public on that topic. So, Councillor Thalasides, are you going to respond from the leadership team?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, first of all, to Justin, who, of course, runs Better Streets, and we've worked with on a number of other schemes over the last 18 months. To Julie, who I've met before, I think in her capacity with Friends of the Earth to talk about environmental issues. And likewise to Barry, who runs one of the largest resident associations along the Kensington High Street. I understand that emotions are running high and that there are strong views on either side of this particular subject. And to give you a flavour of that, Mr. Mayor, over 1,000 emails have been in the active travel email inbox at a recent count, split roughly about 55 to 45 against the cycle lanes. However, of people who identified as residents of the borough, the split was 31% for and 69% against the scheme. Do I weigh the opinions of residents more than others in London? Yes, that is my role as a local councillor. I am a representative of Holland Ward and Kensington and Chelsea. Threatening us with legal action and financial penalties will make no difference to decisions that we make. These are collective decisions. And on top of the feeling from our residents, this period is vital for our businesses who have made it clear to us that this is not the time to be experimenting, particularly at a time when, frankly, some shops may have weeks to go until they come under even greater pressure or go to the wall. We are still listening. We will look at cycling provision again. We always will. But our focus is likely to shift to alternative schemes that have a positive impact on the lives of our residents. We remain committed to things like school streets. We've expanded that programme massively over the last few months, and 20-mile-an-hour limits, which we've just introduced and on which there is going to be more and more enforcement. However, this is all about balance, and we do accept that we're in the middle of lots of different views, and that whichever way we fall, people will be happy and unhappy. For example, I've seen one local school that's campaigned to keep the lane, but at the same time has asked the council for free parking for teachers in the borough, which we have granted. Nothing is ever black and white. But before I wrap up, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to put a question to the minority party. I am yet to hear from any member of the minority party claiming to represent their collective view on this scheme. Perhaps Councillor Thaxter, who I understand to be the transport spokesperson for the Labour group, might want to express a view. I would like to know, does the Kensington Labour group support keeping the cycle lane in?
Councillor,
or would it like us to take out the lanes?
The question from the public. Can you please bring your comments to a close?
That was the close. My question, I've answered the questions, and I'm happy to put to the Labour group whether they support retaining or removing the lanes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thalasides. Thank you. Who wishes to respond from the Labour group?
I'm looking forward to responding to Councillor Thalasides. It's Councillor Sinalari. Thank you to all the representatives from the campaign and local residents who have come here to pose these significant questions tonight. Kensington and Chelsea Council has long played the victim card on the matter of safe cycling while the rest of the world has clearly moved on. In 2013, RBKC blocked the TfL proposal to join up 2 stretches of Supercycle Highway 9 along Kensington High Street. This would have completed a full east to west cycle route through Hammersmith and Fulham and Westminster. The position of the Labour opposition has been firm in supporting a permanent cycle lane on Kensington High Street for over a decade, and both the National Labour and Conservative parties are encouraging cycle lane development in their manifestos. The temporary scheme clearly has benefits. Data shows the scheme was successful in increasing the number of cyclists riding along Kensington High Street, with a trebling in volume at best. It is a family-friendly cycle route, not simply a commuter highway a la Holland Park Avenue. This is demonstrated by the strong support it received from our local schools, as well as our major institutions and employers, including Chelsea and Westminster Hospital and Imperial College. However, we also recognise concerns raised by residents about the poor engineering of the scheme. The safety concerns include the intersection between side roads and Kensington High Street, which are problematic. The positioning of bollards is irregular and a danger to turning vehicles. A good example is a rogue bollard by the intersection with Hornton Street. There is also incorrectly positioned signage, including a painting of a cycle lane on the carriageway and not on the cycle lane. These engineering shortfalls are the fault of RBKC alone, but this is no surprise given the inadequate consultation process from start to finish. The Labour Group expresses our sincere concerns with the integrity of the consultation process, which has led to the removal of the scheme after fewer than 3 months and after £700,000 of taxpayer money has already been spent on the installation. It is now clear that the consultation was political as opposed to objective. The Council provided the consultation as a platform for Felicity Buchan and Tony Devonish to lobby, with Devonish using it as a talking point for his dicey re-election campaign. On the other hand, when Kensington had a Labour MP, the leadership team didn't account for her views in their decision-making process on other transport-related schemes. This clearly demonstrates that this consultation was partisan. The statistics used to justify removal of the lane are inadequate at best and inaccurate in parts. Local shops and restaurants have been closed during lockdown, so we cannot make inferences about how the scheme has impacted the interaction of customers. We also now know that the increased congestion was as a result of concurrent public works schemes and not the cycle lane in itself. The leadership team has therefore been too hasty in interpreting statistics clearly influenced by lockdown and must continue analysing the data as restrictions are now lifted. In addition, a study showing the impact on emergency services would be useful for us. Shockingly, the decision was announced to this council without any prior warning on the 27th of November. The significance of this is that it passed all the deadlines for councillors to submit questions or motions for the upcoming council meeting today, which would have allowed us to hold the leadership team to account and possibly change council policy. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, £700,000, including £300,000 of government money, has been wasted on a poorly implemented scheme. The council has had ample opportunity to develop a permanent scheme that is co-designed alongside residents and which will therefore gain their support. The fact that you have failed to implement a single major cycle lane, Mr. Thalasides, is at odds with the Prime Minister's cycling and walking revolution and is a shame on this borough. We, the Labour opposition, demand a public inquiry before removal of this scheme. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we now move, please, to question number 6 from Mr. Ian Smith? Will the council please drop all proposals to have compulsory annual visits to council tenants? This breaches privacy and will be overturned by the regulator's commissioners. Will the council mind its staff from central government are brought in for a few months to replace the councillors responsible for housing to restore good practice? Councillor Taylor-Smith, are you responding to that?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, can I just say thank you, Ian, for your question, and I am very sorry that we don't see you tonight. So following your and the other residents' feedback at the Tenants Consultancy Committee meeting last week, I will be proposing an amendment to the Labour motion to stop mandatory inspections for all properties in the borough. For the council, housing, whilst we have additional landlord responsibilities, which means that we have to keep our homes safe and well maintained. And I feel we also have a moral duty as a social landlord to check that the health and well-being of our tenants is not compromised. Having an annual inspection of council tenancies feels like an appropriate and proportionate action to comply with this, and I believe that any regulator would appreciate this is not a breach of privacy, but a proper and responsible management of our resident homes. And I'm immensely proud of the welfare checks during the lockdown and on our residents, and they very much appreciated that. We made over 5,500 calls for our most vulnerable residents in council housing and in temporary accommodation. And clearly we had to suspend these visits currently owing to the pandemic, but we will resume this when it is safe to do so. And we will be steadfast in our commitment to make sure our residents would be okay and therefore maintaining these visits. And I do believe that we have the overwhelming support of our residents to continue to do this. Regarding your last sentence, I'm not sure where this request is coming from. Since taking back the management of our housing stock in March 2018, satisfaction in the way that the council service has improved and our residents are at the heart of this decision-making process. I mean, it's not where we want to be, but we are certainly heading in the right direction, and we've shown commitment to get this right. As for you calling on central government, well, you may find that they've got a little bit more on their hands with Brexit and COVID than this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Who is going to respond from the Labour Group, please?
I will respond to Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I start with thanking, first of all, Ian Smith. Ian, thank you very much for not only for these questions, but for the time that you have been attending the TCC and also the background work that you have been doing to support the well-being of our residents. To answer your first question, I believe what we're trying to do now is not just compulsory annual visit that the council is doing, which you and most of our residents do not support. What we're trying to do this evening is to actually put forward a motion that I will be proposing this evening to help and support our residents to make sure that the homes that we are living are fit for human habitations, not just a top-down policy to check who's who and who's living. Although we have to keep safe our residents and who's living, and to know that properties are probably handed to the rightful tenants, not just people are living and subletting. But what I will tell you tonight or this evening is that we will hopefully pass a motion that will not just checking who's who and who's living, but also looking after the residents and the health and the well-being of our residents. We all know the importance of COVID-19 has made for us to have a decent, safe and healthy homes. And I think tonight, hopefully, we will come up with that motion. And I will say not just people to be checked to who's who, but also to support and have a decent homes that worth living and fit for human habitation. On your second question, if I go back to, I think when the Grenfell happened and the Tory council and the leaders were been changing and almost 20 of them resigned, probably the government should have come in by then and take over the council. But I think it's too little too late now for a government to come in, simply because the Prime Minister at the time agreed, or at least suggest and promised that every person will be rehoused within 4 weeks. Now we are approaching 4 years, and we have still some of the Grenfell and the nearby areas is still homeless and temporary accommodations. I don't think they will be able to do that, and I think the only way we can get a new regime in town, hopefully next time, is to vote for the Labour Party, and we will be dealing with these issues head on. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all the members of the public who've given questions for this evening, a good range of topics. We have another question that's come in here, question from Jack Pitsey. There's one poor woman from Way Ahead Hostel in Warwick Road who I have heard sometimes tries to get into people's homes. She often walks our streets raging and shouting at the heavens. Sometimes she does it before dawn, shrieking outside of my bedroom window. It's a horrible, unwanted wake-up call. What will the council do to address this problem? Who's going to answer that from the leadership team? Who's doing that?
That's me, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Fulfilling my role as spokesperson on this matter, unlike the Labour Party, who seem to pick and choose. Mr. Mayor, this is obviously an individual case, and we don't speak about individual cases in public forums. You will see tonight that we do have a motion on mental health, and I don't know this individual woman's situation, but what I do know is that the Way Ahead Hostel is where we have housed a number of our rough sleepers, a policy that the government has brought forward and has been widely successful in getting people off our streets and providing support to them and making sure that they're housed and looked after during this most bizarre of times. I do apologise to Mr. Pitsey if he's been affected. This is obviously distressing to hear, and we must work harder to make sure that all of our residents who need help are receiving it. And that is why we are here tonight having a motion to look at reviewing our mental health services within the borough. Of course, if there's an issue that Mr. Pitsey really does need to raise, I'm more than happy to speak to him directly and have a conversation. We do know that Earls Court has issues of this nature in the borough, and that's why it was the first place we piloted our antisocial behaviour teams with the NSL pilot, and also now we have community wardens who have been incredibly successful in speaking to rough sleepers and offering support and bringing them in off the streets to make sure that they are warm and looked after. And I welcome the work that they've done. I will reach out to Mr. Pitsey and look to the case directly, and also deal with officers on the best way to help this individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Who would like to speak from the opposition group? Councillor Mason, are you going
Thank
to
you, Mr. Mayor.
speak?
Well, of course, we cannot and will not speak about individual cases, but of course, those of us in North Kensington, we recognise these cases over the decades, and of course, if you look at the Local Government Association assessment of the spending review with regard to being able to deal with the funding issues, the resource issues, they say that globally, in England, there's a 6.7 billion funding gap, and they do say that the social care and mental health funding and care is of course, as we all know, horribly under-resourced and will remain so, and that there's no long-term solution being suggested by the government. And if this council can come up with a solution, then well and good. But if obviously, from back in the days of care in the community, when people were supposedly looked after at home, and that didn't work because we didn't have enough people, officers to visit them. People invariably are, if people are wandering the streets in a state of distress, then it means either they have a legal right to leave the hostel or the premises, or that there's some kind of supervisory problem in the premises. But the fact remains, of course, is that if somebody, and it has happened in the past, and it's happened in this borough in the past decades, if somebody of that kind should come furloughed or have the virus. So yes, it's something we obviously need to deal with, because should anything happen to this person, and I used to say this to officers over the decades, with particular cases that I dealt with, when they said to me, well, we either have no legal duty or these things happen, councillor. I said, well, you're going to look fine standing up in court explaining that to the judge. So of course, Sam needs to deal with that, because of course he's the one that will be standing in the dock explaining the council's policy if it doesn't work, if it doesn't pan out, if he's promised it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have no other questions, so we're now moving to item 5 on the petitions, and just to say thank you again to all those members of the public who submitted questions. Thank you. So A5 petitions. Do members have any petitions to present? I think
I have a petition, Mr.
Mason. Yeah.
I have a petition. I have a petition regarding the trees in Warrington Green. I've been told that I mustn't choose the paragraphs. There's 5 paragraphs. I'll be as quickly as possible with them, but I've been told I shouldn't decide which ones to. This petition is signed by 856 persons, residents and persons in Goulburn and across North Kensington. And the Warrington Green Estate and the wider community of North Kensington and beyond calls upon RBKC to stop Catalyst Housing from felling 42 trees on Warrington Green Estate, and upon Catalyst Housing to consult more fully with residents and the wider community and to reverse their plans for the regeneration that will not destroy 42 trees. The petition is in 2 parts, and it talks about hard copy and online version, adding up to 856. RBKC has concluded a round of consultation for Phase 2B on reserve matters, the height of buildings and window sizes. Why hasn't residents and the wider community been informed and consulted about the imminent felling of 42 mostly mature trees? This is a significant matter for environmental, aesthetic and health reasons in a part of the borough that is heavily polluted by the Westway, and the tree plan submitted by Catalyst Housing in all their planning documentation is from 2009 and states that in Phase 2 only 7 trees will be felled. There is no adequate tree plan that will offset the loss of such mature trees. Planting small trees in private gardens is not fit for purpose. Catalyst, in their November newsletter, when they first announced the felling, mentioned only 11 being replanted for the public. I appreciate you have the demanding challenge of building more truly affordable homes and are committed to more social housing units, but please not at the expense of our environment. RBKC needs to show it has learned how to consult and operate effectively since the Grenfell tragedy. We regret to say that this is the third petition to RBKC, and one of the petitioners said, I have previously visited with Silchar Estate residents who read out a petition in the town hall meeting in 2015 objecting to the proposed regeneration plans, and I have also attended with Grenfell Tower residents who read out a petition to councillors asking for the council to investigate the actions of the GMO. And final paragraph, the people who live in and around Wannington Green have been through 9 years of noise and severe disruption due to regeneration. We have already lost numerous trees and nobody wants any more cut down. RBKC is claiming to be a greener borough and committed to a climate change pledge. We trust that you and Catalyst Housing can listen to the voices of local residents who want to live in a healthier and more pleasant environment in which mature trees play a vital role. I submit that on behalf of the three Goulburn councillors, on behalf of the petitioners. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
The petition has been submitted to the relevant officers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So we now move to item number 6, the address by the Leader and the Leader of a Minority Party. So I now call upon the Leader to address the meeting and Councillor Mason to respond. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Mr. Mayor, it's difficult to believe that we're now in December because 2020 has been a year that has thrown all our worlds upside down, our home life, our work life, and all our social lives. And for some, it feels like a very long year indeed. But for many of us, including me, it seems to have completely flown by. There has been very little time to assess, to reflect, because so much has happened in such a small amount of time. But I never tire of saying how proud I am, or how proud we are, of our residents, of our business leaders, and of our staff. Our communities are strong. Our businesses are resilient and innovative, and our skilled and dedicated staff are continuing to work hard to meet ever-changing demands and issues. And I don't just say this because it's the right thing for a leader to say or do. It's more than that. I have seen real togetherness from all parts of the borough and from all members of our society. Well, Mr. Mayor, togetherness. Well, we've seen what togetherness can do. Volunteers, support workers, teachers, neighbours, health workers, our NHS. Even across our political lines, we've delivered food together, knocked on doors, made calls to the elderly and vulnerable. And this togetherness is spilling over into other issues. We're united on saving the Brompton, and we're united on shopping locally to support our high streets. It's a welcome sight. And this is the borough I know, people who care about each other, doing their best to help each other and improve things for everyone. And Mr. Mayor, we also listen, not just to the latest rant on social media, but to our residents, face to face when we can, or at virtual meetings that have now become the norm. We base our decisions on what our residents and businesses want, what they see, what they feel, alongside the data and the facts and figures, even if this makes things difficult for us as politicians. And that includes cycle lanes and doing the right thing for Kensington High Street at a time when our local economy faces a critical crossroads. We announced last week we intended to remove the temporary cycle lane. We formally took the decision today, and the work will begin this evening. Mr. Mayor, we keep everything under review. We listen, we respond, we do what we think's right. And Mr. Mayor, I finish my remarks this evening with a plea to everyone out there in our borough. London has been placed in Tier 2. This does not mean a free for all, but it does mean that we have freedom, some freedom anyway, back in our lives again. It means we can all look forwards, not just to the Christmas period, but beyond it. Vaccines will be available. We heard tonight from the Prime Minister that one vaccine has been approved tonight. Testing is being ramped up. We even conducted the first test for community testing today. Having been a guinea pig myself, I can report back to colleagues that the whole operation is running smoothly, and we plan to roll it out starting with some schools next week. Help for business, as Catherine was saying, is there. And we're looking again at how we make sure families are supported in the weeks ahead through targeted efforts and grants and broader help like free school meals in the holidays. Everything we can do, everything that's within our control, we are doing. And yes, we do have financial gaps, but we're working with government to make sure we can cover them. And we have managed our finances well over the years. And once again, money is there when support is needed. But Mr. Mayor, on top of all that, my ask tonight is that everybody considers the shops on the corners of their streets or in the middle of their community. This Christmas, think about the places that are struggling near to your homes. Think what you can buy locally. Think about the jobs and employment those shops bring. Don't jump online just because it's cold or damp outside. Use this time to get to know your local high streets again, and use this time to help our shops, our pubs, our restaurants and our bars. Just please do it safely. Follow the guidelines that are there for all of us. And that way, together, we can protect lives and we can protect livelihoods. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mason, do you wish to reply? Up to 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I couldn't agree more about shopping local and not giving these greedy online companies and large companies soaking up our money, all our business, because it's easier to do it than to go down to the local shop, which are fast disappearing. But it's hard to know, Mr. Mayor, what to say that would mean very much to many borough residents and their families living as they are, hand to mouth and day to day, suffering the hardships of 2 COVID-19 lockdowns. And it's hard for many of us to imagine the distress and anger bereaved families and survivors feel every day, hearing the litany of incompetence and criminal negligence and inhumanity pouring from the witnesses at the Grenfell inquiry every day. And I've said it again, I've said it once, and I'll say it again. Anybody in local government who wants to learn the lesson of how not to do procurement and local government and development should be on there every day listening to what's happening. And if you're one of the borough's 40+ nationalities, Mr. Mayor, you're going to be distressed and angry at the rising levels of racism and discrimination that affect you and your family's safety, your employment chances, and the way you're treated by the state that adds to your current hardships. And many are incredulous that they see that it's the government whipping up a tide of racism against them, and nothing good will come of that, as Mrs. Thatcher discovered to her cost in 1981. Those of us there will remember. And the Chancellor's spending review, the leader mentioned budget holes, and there are budget holes. And of course, the LGA has mentioned the 6.7 billion budget hole in England, and we'll come to that when we discuss the MTFS, the financial situation later. And I could quote figures all day long, but no one cares much about facts these days, Mr. Mayor, only their own facts. But closer to home, I know that my own ward caseload has more than doubled during lockdown, and it's the same for other North Kensington councillors and maybe other councillors in other parts of the borough. And this is a real litmus test of what's happening in our communities battered by COVID and an array of ongoing draconian, inhuman government policies. I've residents coming to me with all sorts of problems: multiple debt worsened by universal credit, process problems, rent and council tax arrears across council, housing association and private renters in desperate situations, hungry families with children using food banks, isolated elderly and ill residents, some without computers or mobiles, needing support. There are super overcrowded households in distress who want to move but can't, and a lot of hidden homeless. Residents with succession problems where notice to quit orders have been served, even where there's a 50,000 and rising case backlog in the courts, Mr. Mayor. And residents developing mental health problems because of too much antisocial behaviour, noise nuisance, domestic violence or neighbour harassment, or they have drug dealers living next door, drug houses that make their life unbearable. And when you have housing and housing association staff working from home and limited police cover, they all come to us councillors. And it's the same with planning problems, where some businesses unfortunately are taking the opportunity to refurbish and build in breach of planning regulations where they know officers are furloughed or working for home. And many families with school children are stressed about the under-18s free travel. The government has ordered the mayor to act, and if many families are too poor to feed their children, then they can't afford bus fares, Mr. Mayor, and older residents are constantly telling us that they fear losing the Freedom Pass. And of course, facts and honesty go up the spout when we talk about that as well. And people are deemed to be too stupid and can be easily hoodwinked. So tube and bus fares crashed by 90% during the pandemic, and so does the fares of private rail companies. And so what happens? The government bails out the rail companies with no strings attached, but the tubes and the buses, not the tubes and the buses, because of course there's a Labour mayor and people are not too stupid to notice that, Mr. Mayor. Imagine we are in the middle of a pandemic that's killed some 70,000 people, or will soon do so, and a myriad of London families and businesses are in crisis, and government ministers are playing political football with our transport system and much else. And they're electioneering. They're electioneering on a whole plethora of other issues. And Mr. Johnson has to explain why, when he was mayor, he dealt away the whole 700 million annual operating subsidy for Transport for London, which is about 1.4 billion now. And people say these things to us, and they're not, and they're deemed to be too stupid to understand what is going on. We know better than they do. But it is scandalous that these rich ministers, Mr. Mayor, who don't have to worry where the next rent payment deal is coming from, are playing election games while our residents are worrying how to feed their children or pay their fares. And it is to be hoped that government ministers will be held accountable at any inquiry established to examine their handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, which many people, even some of their own Conservative commentators, have said is absolutely scandalous. And I expect. Can you
bring to a close, Councillor?
I will do. One more sentence, Mr. Mayor. And as I expect Sir Martin Moore-Bick to hold former and serving government ministers accountable at the Grenfell inquiry later next year for their part in the failure to maintain building and fire safety regulations to a standard that could have prevented a succession of high-rise fires, including Grenfell. And I just wrote to him again today to remind him that he has promised that they will be held accountable. So I agree with the leader that it's been a hard and fast year, perhaps for her, but it's been a snail's pace year for people who are under the cosh, and our businesses who are absolutely on their knees and struggling with catastrophic collapses of income. And what we need the government to do is to put their money where their mouth is, which they haven't done, to pay what it takes, which they promised and haven't done, Mr. Mayor. So it has been a dreadful year for our businesses and our people.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
And I hope that we can try and stem that in the next year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank
you. I now turn to item number 7, order of business. In accordance with standing orders, I rule that the order of business shall be as printed in the agenda. So item 8, reports from the leadership team. I call upon the leader to move the reception of the report and Councillor Taylor-Smith to second it.
I'd like to remove the report, Mr. Mayor.
And I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So I now call upon paragraph 1, medium-term financial strategy. Councillor Wheel, would you like to introduce this?
Thank you. Yes, I would. Sorry, I'm just changing my. There we go. We are in this. We present this medium-term financial strategy in the context of the most extraordinary economic circumstances. The government borrowing by next year will be 396 billion, which is almost inconceivable. And the economy is due to contract by about 11.3%, which is the biggest contraction in the economy in 300 years, I'm told. But this council, despite massive COVID pressures, this MTFS shows that we are nearly at a point of balancing our budget, or being able to present a balanced budget for 2021-22, with details to be agreed and finalised after the consultation process. We've been supported by some very positive announcements in the pending review. I would point out to the Chamber that these positive announcements are generally one-off in-year decisions and announcements, and won't put off some of the difficult decisions that we've got to make in future. The real issue is that after next year, our income will continue to come under pressure and demand for our services will continue to grow. And even without the fairer funding, you will see from the MTFS that we're looking at a shortfall of 28 million in those next 2 years. Fairer funding, of course, is also a clear danger to London, and we're likely to see a transfer of funds out of London and to other parts of the country. So with a £28 million shortfall already identified and the spectre of funding, all our attention in the coming year must be focused on doing things in different ways, looking at different pathways, different operating models, looking at the use of technology and doing things better, procuring things better, making access to services easier and cheaper, and looking at our own internal housekeeping via mechanisms like spans. And we must be more data-driven and look to good housekeeping. And I emphasise all of that because this is truly a whole council effort. Everybody on scrutiny committees, on the leadership team, all of us, it's beholden on us to do our bit to contribute towards finding those savings and looking at best value for money for our residents. And finally, I just want to mention capital. We're not actually exactly where we want to be on that. We've still got work to do, but we have made huge improvements, I think, this year in our controls and made some reprofiling, significant reprofiling of our capital expenditure. And when you remember that for every million we borrow, it costs the council £64,000 a year over 20 years, you'll realise how significant and important it is that we do this. So I'm happy to present this medium-term financial strategy and look forward to comment.
Thank you very much. Would any members like to comment on the strategy?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, please.
If I may. Am I called first or not?
You are, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you. I'll swap with you any minute.
Mr. Mason.
Yes. Well, of course, the government may have borrowed 396 billion, as Councillor Wheel said, but of course, it isn't nearly as much as the trillion, almost a trillion, they gave to bail out the banks who we know are wandering the streets in rags and broke. But as in previous years, the Labour Group will, of course, reserve our position and abstain on this report, a report to be used, as we know, to construct the 2021-22 budget, whilst we work on our alternative budget, assisted by Council of Finance Officers, as you all know we do every year. But on the revenue budget, given we are in year 10 of a downward path of central government council financing, and with the ongoing COVID-19 spend and loss of income of some 42.7 million to date, it's probably worth looking at the budget structure to see if our model will produce the best outcomes for our residents and the savings, as Mary has mentioned. And the report says that taking into account the council's income level, current spend and the known financial pressure, there's a 3-year budget gap of 45.9 million that will, it says, equal budget cuts of 17.7 million next year, 18 million the year after, and 10.2 million in 23-24. But of course, we know, Mr. Mayor, that all financial levers are up in the air, so we don't know what will actually happen. Government compensation grants to date to the council, 25.3 million, with an additional 5 million from our reserves. So government covers about half our COVID costs when they promise to do whatever it takes, unless anyone jumps up to laud the government on support. You only have to listen, as I mentioned earlier, to the Local Government Association said on spending, on the recent spending review. Coronavirus has cost English councils over 11 billion, they say, this year, and the government refunded less than half, meaning many councils will be forced to make severe cuts. Local authority core funding from government, say the LGA, as I said earlier, is projected to rise by 4.5% or 2.2 billion next year. But of course, only 300 million of that is new money, and 1 billion will come from council tax increases that they say will hurt large numbers of households already suffering severe loss of household income from COVID-19. And as I said earlier, they say that whilst it's good to get 2.2 billion, they actually need 6.7 billion to cover the gaps in England. There's no plan to fix and pay for social care, as the PM promised in 2019, as I said earlier, and that the 2% council tax precept is only a sticking plaster, they say, and won't deal with the long-term pressures. The misnamed fair funding change, if you've had time to wade through the 50-page LGA review, which I unfortunately have, I'm a geek, won't deal with any of the long-term pressures. And it's been postponed again, and so we won't have that upheaval next year, Mr. Mayor. So we can see the way the finance regime continues to slide, increasingly less core cash from government, partial COVID compensation, more costs loaded onto residents via council tax, and inevitable service reductions quite often. The Bank of England, we're told, cut interest rates. In this report, it says by 10% in March. That's a pandemic response that makes borrowing costs lower, but reduces the return on investments. But of course, in recent months, Mr. Mayor, banks have written to savers notifying a reduction to 0.01% in interest from existing putrid rates. So robbing millions of savers is another swoop on their accounts, people whose household incomes are already on the floor. Now, the government, as I said earlier, gave the banks almost $1 trillion stimulus of our money between June and November to encourage them to reduce interest rates. Free money, as we know, they use to increase stock prices for their own benefit, when what's needed is radical reform of the levers of finance to make them work for us and not to continue looting the country. But going back to the balance between revenue and capital, which Mary mentioned in the council budget, and whether the majority party has placed too many eggs in the capital basket or not, the overall capital programme equals 286,589, partly funded this year by 152.2 million borrowing and 24.5 million revenue contribution. And as Councillor Wheel rightly said, for every million we borrow, it costs 64 or 68 million, I think, 68,000 in interest rates. And this year, in the next years, we've allocated 3.3 million for interest payments. So it's clear that if you tie up too much cash in the capital programme end, when revenue funding is declining, then of course resident services are bound to suffer if you can't make if you can't link up. Now, the Labour group will say what we think about all of this at the March budget meeting when we speak to our alternative budget. But I have to say the limited capital programme review, and Councillor Wheel mentioned something about that, carried out, that defers 3 projects and reduces borrowing by 900,000. But 900,000 is not the review I would have ordered if I was a leadership team member, Mr. Mayor. And finally, we are, of course, going to revisit the Council's budget and finance policies I think on March 3rd, 2021. So I will leave it there for now, but there's a few thoughts that nobody may want to listen to.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Councillor Lindsay, do you wish to speak?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I want to talk briefly about the savings proposed on Annex A2. And looking at the big picture, Mr. Mayor, 3 savings account for some 70% of the total of 10.5 million. The spans and layers account for almost half, and the rest of the some 70% that I want to focus on is the waste contract and the TA. It is critical that these 3 savings deliver, or we will simply not achieve the savings that we're meant to. And my question to Councillor Wheel is one of reassurance that, Lord, that we will make the savings that have been stated, but second, that due consideration has been given to the possibility that things next year might be more difficult than this year, with all that entails. We are just over 7/12 of the way through the year in terms of reporting, and so projecting forward reserves is difficult. But I just want to flag up that the next year, actually the next few years, may be more difficult than this year. So while it is right to use reserves, we shouldn't use them fully now, because it may be that they are needed more in the future than even now. So we will have to be wise, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for choosing me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lindsay. Would anybody else like to comment on the medium-term financial strategy? Thank you. Councillor Wheel, do you wish to sum up, or?
Yes, just briefly. Thank you very much. Well, thank you both for those comments. While I can't promise to carry out a radical review of the levers of capitalism, as I think Councillor Mason would like me to do, I do always pay great attention to his comments and take those on board. Thank you very much. And we've had a useful dialogue also before the leadership team, which I'm grateful for. And turning to Councillor Lindsay's point, Yes, you're right. There are some significant individual savings in there, one of which is already in the bag, so to speak, contractually, and the other ones I am very confident that we will be able to achieve. They're identified. There are a few hoops to go through, but I am absolutely grateful to him for bringing to our attention that there are those 3 very significant savings, and we will need to be spreading our net a lot wider, which I think is possibly the corollary of what he was saying in future years. And I completely agree with him about the importance of buoyant reserves, because as we have learnt so very clearly this year, how much more comfortable and easier our position is, because we do have that not excessive, but we do have that comfort level of reserves behind us, and I agree that it's important that we maintain that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wheel. So
Mr. Mayor, I must apologise for thinking that Councillor Wheel was all-powerful in the universe. Obviously, that is not the case.
It's excusable.
Thank you.
Perhaps excusable.
So is the medium-term financial strategy adopted? Do I have anybody who wishes to not adopt it?
Labour Group abstained.
Labour Group abstained, thank you. We do it by whips then. Councillor Kamali, are we Conservative Group happy to adopt?
Is Councillor Thalasitis, Mr. Mayor?
Of course, sorry, I do beg your pardon. Yeah. Councillor Thalasitis.
Yes, indeed, we are.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Abstaining.
Councillor Palmer.
I'm not going to sit on the wall like some member of the opposition in government. I'm supporting them.
Okay, so I declare it carried. Let's move to paragraph 2, the statement of licensing policy. Councillor Kamali, do you wish to introduce this, please?
Mr. Mayor, I believe it was Councillor McVeigh was going to introduce, as I'm no longer the portfolio holder for this brief.
Okay, Councillor McVeigh, do you wish to introduce this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking to this as chair of the licensing committee. And firstly, I would like to express my huge thanks to the licensing team of officers for the work on this report. And I say team because they really are an incredibly close-knit, hard-working team, and they've been led brilliantly by Patrick Crowley for many years. Sadly, Patrick is not well, and I know everyone here would like to join me in sending him all our best wishes and thoughts. I was a relatively new councillor when I was appointed chair of the licensing committee, and Patrick took me under his wing, and no question to him was too foolish or too much trouble. So thank you. And his years of experience in licensing, over 20 years with the council, and before which he'd been in the police, means he really has seen every eventuality there is to see. Our licensing team is a small one, and this year more than ever they have really punched above their weight, dealing with all the changes mandated by the government to our licensed premises. So again, thank you. So to the report, we have just over 1,000 licensed premises in our borough. Interestingly, this is pretty much the same number as in 2005 when the Act came into force, and includes shops, restaurants, bars, hotels, employing, we estimate, about 10,000 people. And this doesn't include the supply chain, the accountants, the designers, the builders, and very sadly, as we all know, some of these businesses will not survive to see 2021. So to this statement, the licensing policy, as others before, seeks to maintain a balance between the businesses operating in our area and our residents and cultural and tourist interests. But as we know, this year is not the year to make changes to our policy because as a licensing authority, we have to consult with our residents, many of whom were away, as well as our licensee holders, and they were closed for 3 to 4 months. So for this statement, we're treading water. And we've only made minor changes. And for those saying, why make any at all, we have to, by law, update our policy every 5 years. So if I can draw your attention to page 3 of the key decision report with the papers, and you can see there's the table here, and it shows the paragraphs where any changes have been made, and most are minor. Though there are 2 slightly more significant ones I'll just draw your attention to, which is one about shadow licenses, paragraph 18. These are relatively new to our council, and they're very important as they allow a landlord to preserve a premises licence in the unfortunate event a tenant goes bust, which sadly this year is happening all too often. And as the law only allows 28 days to reinstate the licence, this protection is needed. And another small change is paragraph 23, where we encourage a licensed premises to stop using single-use plastic glasses, though unfortunately COVID has increased the use of throwaway items, especially plastic ones, another unaccounted cost of COVID. So in summary, I recommend this light touch review of our statement of licensing policy to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would any member like to comment on this? Councillor Press, I think you would like to comment.
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Very faintly.
Oh, can you hear me better now?
Fractionally.
Oh dear. Shall I continue?
Continue, and we'll do our best. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Coalville councillors are always pleased to come top of ward league tables, but it was disappointing, if not unexpected, to come top of the ward scoring for noise and nuisance complaints in 2019, with Appendix C of the report showing 144 complaints relating to noise and nuisance from licensed premises, and well ahead of St Helens at 106 and Queensgate at 104. And I also note that the highest number of responses to the licensing consultation by individuals came from residents living in the Portobello Road or nearby. So licensing and licensing policy is an important issue toward residents, and our councillor caseload is heavy with licensing complaints, all of which we would like to avoid. So although the majority of respondents wanted a closure time of 11, we are encouraged that the policy continues to state clearly that premises or club premises certificates will not normally be granted, which permit opening hours which are later than midnight. But midnight should be the latest closure hour. It is very disappointing, therefore, to see in Section 8 the number of caveats that are added to this closure time. 810 states it is appropriate to generally limit opening times to midnight, and also states each application needs to be considered in its own individual limits and may result in the terminal hour being before or after midnight. I'm aware of the legal limitations of the policy, and I'm aware of our current situation for businesses and the legal obligations of the licensing committee. But the caveats and loopholes to the stated policy of a terminal hour of midnight are going to leave Portobello Road residents and many others across the borough in the same predicament we've been in for the past 5 years. Over the past 5 years or more, under the previous policy, a number of premises have been licensed in the Portobello Road with a 1 a.m. in the morning closing time, which, given dispersal or non-dispersal, means residents are disturbed until around 2 p.m. at weekends. These 1 a.m. licenses are often also stated as a precedent for a new premises license to be granted with the same late hours in the same street, and so it goes on. The majority of pubs and licensed premises on the Portobello Road are welcome, well managed, and cause little disturbance, and we hope as they reopen and they will continue to stay in business, and we will support them in any way we can. But in the few cases, mainly of more recent arrivals, it can take up to 2 years or more of endless noise and nuisance complaints and serious disturbances to move to a license review and all the resources and the work that that entails. So Coalville Council would like to see this council, the lead member and the licensing team consider applying the midnight closing time to all new licensed premises applicants, and with no review to a later opening hour until the premises have been managed with no complaints for 2 years. To introduce a process and pilot whereby current premises already opening until after midnight transfer back to a midnight closure if the premises passes to a new licensee or owner. And lastly, to look seriously at a neighbourhood policy. Look at neighbourhoods in the whole, so that high streets and neighbourhoods with a high percentage of licensed premises can be reviewed as a whole and standard closing times applied. So as the policy states in Section 8, we feel the staggered closing hours throughout the night, rather than reduce adverse effects on residents, in fact do disturb them continuously. That is why so many individual residents in Coalville took the time to respond and in detail to the consultation. So I also thank the whole licensing team and the lead member when they consider these proposals, and for the support that they've given us councillors and residents in Portobello Road over the years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Press. Councillor Mills, did you wish to speak on this?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Just to endorse the policy and compliment the licensing team. And indeed, can I also compliment the licensing committee? It's a cross-party committee. Licensing is very front-facing, and the fact that we all do it so, I think, well, really, professionally, is to be commended. So no more than that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mills. Would anybody else like to comment on that? Councillor Thalasitis, do you want to sort of sum up on this?
Well, not so much summing up, but to echo what Councillor Mills said, and I think a couple of others have too, and to pay tribute to the licensing team and to my predecessor, Councillor Kamali, who I know did a great job on licensing, and likewise to Councillor McVeigh chairing the committee, and to commend the statement that we're hopefully adopting tonight.
Thank you very much. Well, let's move to adopting. Is the statement of licensing policy adopted? Councillor Thalasitis, what was the Conservative group?
Yes, it's adopted.
Councillor Lowry?
We're in favour.
Adopting. Councillor Wade?
In favour.
Councillor Palmer?
In favour.
So I declared it carried. So paragraph 3, urgent key decisions. This report is submitted for information, and I ask the council to note it. Reports from the council side committees. Item 9. Report of the Audit and Transparency Committee, and I call upon Councillor Wason to move the reception of the report and Councillor Lindsay to second it. Councillor Wason.
I move to propose it.
Councillor Lindsay. Councillor Lindsay, do you wish to second the report?
I do, and I apologise, I couldn't get my...
Okay, we can vaguely hear you there, Councillor Lindsay, but I take that.
I do second it, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Would any members like to comment on the report?
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Wason here, if I may say a few words.
Yeah.
I think there's a slight sort of misnaming of this on the agenda in terms of report of the Audit and Transparency Committee. I think it's more of a report to the Audit and Transparency Committee by Treasury. So in consultation with the all-powerful Councillor Wheel, she is going to introduce this. But if I may say a few words on behalf of the Audit and Transparency Committee now, is that all right?
You may indeed, yes.
So just to really let the council know that the Treasury officers present to the Audit and Transparency Committee at all our committee meetings. And I personally, and speaking on behalf of the committee, have always found them to be extremely competent in fulfilling their roles, with particular praise for Mr. Dawson. The committee scrutinises these reports and also has the opportunity to question them, obviously with a particular slant on risk, as is the remit of our committee. For example, in the last committee meeting in November, a series of questions were once again asked of the Treasury management strategy, and in particular to the counterparty risk. We were and consistently have been satisfied by the answers that the officers provided. So I wanted to assure the council that the committee is happy with the way the Treasury performs its function and that it is regularly scrutinised. This has been a particularly difficult year for everybody on the planet, and the council's treasury management is obviously no exception. You'll note in that report that on the 6th of March 2020, at the full council, we expected rates to rise by 0.5%, and instead, within a matter of a few days, they actually fell 0.5%. One reservation we did have as a committee in these shifting sands of COVID and lockdowns, which obviously has impacts on management's, the Treasury management's ability to fulfill their job, was the restrictions that are placed on them by being restrained by an annual Treasury management statements. However, I have been assured by the Treasury team that they do not feel constrained by this, and they do have a degree of flexibility to work within this. But would just like to add that the Audit and Transparency Committee would support any need to add flexibility to allow the Treasury to perform to the best of their ability. Thank you very much, and I shall now hand over to Councillor Wheel.
Councillor Wheel.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think Councillor Wason's given us an excellent introduction. I suppose all that I want to add is that this report is actually quite out of date in that it takes us to March, and a lot has happened since then, as he points out, including falling rates. And it's getting harder and harder to get any return at all, although, of course, on the other hand, it is getting cheaper to borrow. And the spending review brought the Public Works Loans Board rate down even further. We live in uncertain and unusual times, but it is just worth noting this difficulty in getting any returns. I remain very cautious in my approach, but I absolutely take on board the comments that Councillor Wason made about needing to be flexible, but any flexibility would obviously be a subject of further council consultation. So I'm very happy to leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would any other member wish to comment on this report? Thank you very much. Then I ask the council to note the report. So we now move to item 10. Matters referred to council by scrutiny committees. There are no matters referred by the scrutiny committee to this meeting. So we now move to item 11, question to lead members. So question number 1, I call Councillor Blakeman to read her question, which is printed in the agenda. Councillor Blakeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not opening my camera because I had a minor accident this morning and my face is a mess.
Ooh.
How many leaseholder flats are there on the Lancaster West estate? How many are let out on the open market? How many are still occupied by the original tenant household? And how many are lived by by others who purchased the flat from a previous owner?
Thank you. Councillor Taylor-Smith, do you wish to respond?
Yes, I'm very happy to respond. And Judith, I'm sorry to hear about your accident. But thank you for your question. So there are 199 leaseholders out of a total of 795 properties on the Lancaster West estate. And that splits pretty much into half. 100 of them are resident leaseholders. And I'm afraid I don't have the data as to whether or not they were the original tenants who acquired under right to buy or whether or not they purchased their own homes. And the balance of 99 leaseholders are non-resident leaseholders, and again we don't have the data as to whether or not they're in occupation or whether or not they're renting their property. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Councillor Taylor-Smith. My supplementary question is that given the horror stories we're now hearing almost daily from the Grenfell Tower public inquiry and this government's obsession with home ownership, can you please tell this council why it requires all these innocent 100 resident leaseholders who received so little support after the fire to subsidise the refurbishment of the Lancaster West in accordance with the wishes of this government to the tune of £15,000 each, and whether, once the inquiry has reported, any money they've been forced to pay will be reimbursed?
Okay, the recovery as far from the leaseholders in terms of a percentage of the cost is something which has been discussed and consulted on quite extensively. In simple terms, I mean, this council has an obligation to recover costs under the leasehold obligations that we have. And obviously the percentage applicable in terms of discount, taking into account the government money, is giving a significant discount to those leaseholders. Under Florey's law, where we have received government money, there is a cap on the amount that we can claim, which is a maximum of £15,000. But the actual amount will not be known, obviously, until we've gone through the detailed costings. You know, I appreciate that the sense of feeling as far as the residents are concerned. It's something which we have talked to government to see whether or not we could get additional funding, and that's something which we'll continue to do so. But we do have to stick. You know, the recharging of leaseholders, you know, is a very significant part to the overall costing of the refurbishment, and that's true of the overall capital project of 300 million. You know, it is done on the basis that we can recover monies from our leaseholders.
Thank you very much. Now move to question 2. Call upon Councillor Press to read her question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Taylor-Smith, can you confirm that you and the leadership of this council are fully committed to not selling any of the 600 new homes being built on council-owned land?
Thank you, Councillor Press. And I know I've talked about this many times in meetings, and so I think I'm pleased that you've actually brought this up as a formal question at the council meeting. So the short answer is no, we won't be selling any of the 600 new homes. And affordable homes in terms of, in particular, social rented homes are, of course, the overwhelming priority of our new build programme. So I'm very delighted with the first stage that's now gone through planning committee, and we're getting on with delivering these homes, and the first spades will be going in January. But moreover, the subsidy that we have from the mayor for affordable homes only goes so far. And like any other London borough building new homes, we must build some market homes in order to help subsidise the affordable ones. You know, the commitment is obviously a minimum of 50%, and that's cross-subsidised against all of the homes in the programme. So, I mean, we do favour private rental and not sale. And I recall that you suggested this, Monica, when you were chair of the Housing Property Scrutiny Committee. And the reason for this is it gives us a much greater control over the quality and the opportunities later down the line. And it also gives us the opportunity that if we wish to switch tenures in the future when the debt is paid off, we can do so. So for this reason, our presumption will always be in favour of renting rather than selling the market homes in our programme. But I have to put a caution on this because obviously we can never say never. But any future administrations, if they did want to take a different, would need a key decision in order to dispose of any assets. But this administration is fully committed to renting and not selling. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Press, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yes, please. That was an excellent answer. Thank you, Councillor. And so you said, no, you won't be selling, and yes, you can confirm.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, we won't be selling. Yes, we can confirm.
So, as you know, council housing development companies, COCOs, are a vehicle for low interest loans and councils being able to build and manage intermediate key worker and market rental homes themselves, and are being used successfully by many councils to increase their housing supply across various tenures. So is this council intending to resurrect and make use of our own COCO?
I think that's a tricky question because I mean, we have looked and evaluated doing this, but there are two fundamental problems that we have as a council. One is the availability of land in order to make available to support this, and the byproduct of that is that if you're looking at including land value into the equation in terms of building in this borough, the numbers that just don't come out as anything that's likely to be affordable. So our priority is always to use what land that we have got to build our own homes, to address our obviously very long list of people who had temporary accommodation, rather than looking at some of the shared equity and other schemes that are available. That's not to say that we won't do it, but our focus is very much on the new build. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 3, call Councillor Atkinson to read his question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I wish I'd made it shorter. The question, After the disgraceful whitewash of the special select committee meeting on the Brompton proposed closure, does the Conservative group share the dismay of opposition members that NHS England and the board of the Royal Brompton remain determined to plough ahead with the closure of the Brompton, whilst the medical team that saved the life of the Prime Minister have their hands full leading the national fight against the COVID virus? What active steps is the council leadership group going to take to keep the Brompton Hospital in the borough, or is it more worried about not upsetting the government's plans to decimate the hospital services for local residents?
Councillor Kamali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Atkinson. As you know, we're obviously united across the council in wanting the Royal Brompton to stay exactly where it is. You ask what concrete steps the council leadership have taken. I mean, we can immediately refer to the SPD, which is out for consultation at the moment. That's something that the planning department have been working on for nearly a year in the most trying of circumstances, as we know just how much of a priority the Royal Brompton is for this borough, and continues to be during this COVID pandemic as a leading respiratory hospital, having started as one to treat tuberculosis, which thankfully we now have a vaccine for as well. I would say, to follow up from that, it was an interesting select committee meeting. I'm glad that Councillor Chowan was able to take over for an hour to make sure that the meeting progressed. You will note that I've also sent around a letter signed by both myself and Councillor Thalasitis to all the governors and the chair of the trust, asking them to delay the merger until after our SPD consultation has closed. We are working very closely with our appointed governors and our patient governors, and I have to say I've received positive response from many of the governors to say that it was a timely intervention. So we do look forward to seeing the committed paper from the select committee themselves. I believe they were also going to write to the Brompton. I think this is a complete team effort. We probably just should take politics out of it entirely. We're all committed. I know Councillor Henderson has been fighting very hard locally to make sure it stays, same as Councillor Taylor-Smith and other residents in the borough, and all of us in general. We are fully committed to it staying. I think we've made that point to the Royal Brompton boards fairly apparent, and I look forward to their response and the vote on the 15th. Hopefully it won't be on the 15th, and we'll be able to discuss this properly in the new year with a fully consulted upon SPD. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson, do you wish to ask a supplementary question?
Yeah, yes, or perhaps an extra statement that we are indeed grateful for the SPD, which must be communicated in the strongest possible terms to the Royal Brompton. But I would also invite the Conservative spokesman to agree that actually that the NHS England have not been helpful or neutral in this matter, and that
Councillor Atkinson, I am going to ask you to ask a question, please.
Yeah, in which case I would ask the Conservative leader to agree that the maintenance of a health hub on the Fulham Road must be maintained, as opposed to a theoretical hub south of the river which does not exist.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that, Councillor Kamali, please?
Yes, I mean, I can't speak for NHS England. I'm not making their decisions, but what I can say is I fully agree with you. It should maintain on the Fulham Road, and it should be in Chelsea, and it should not be in Lambeth. Absolutely not. And I'm happy to fight that corner all the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we now move to question number 4, please? Councillor Hammond, do you wish to ask your question? Councillor Hammond, do you wish to ask your question? Councillor Hammond.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me now?
Vaguely.
Oh dear. Right. Well, I'll swap headsets.
We have the question in front of us. Can you just read it, and we've got the question in front of us.
Right. Let me read it then. To ask the lead member for Planning, Place and the Environment to update members on the progress of the Council's request to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government to call in the Forum Hotel planning application that was regrettably approved by the Mayor of London on the 22nd of October, despite near unanimous local opposition. and previous refusal by the Council's Planning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thalasides, do you wish to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Hammond, for the question. I also want to thank you and your colleagues, Councillors Evans and Marshall, for the leadership you've shown locally on this issue in campaigning to stop this inappropriate scheme. I also want to thank local people who have stood with the council, we've stood with them, to make sure that our views are heard and to fight against the Holiday Inn application. The update I can offer is only that the Secretary of State, as I understand it, has issued a holding direction, which means that we await the final decision still. We know that the Mayor of London, yet again, has failed to listen to the people of Kensington and Chelsea, just as he has on other schemes, Newcombe House and many others. But we will continue to fight it. And I'm very happy to update Councillor Hammond and the rest of the Chamber on the outcome of that holding direction in due course.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond, do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm grateful to my friend, the lead member, for his answer. Would he be kind enough to pass on our thanks and the thanks of everybody in South Kensington to the Council's planning officers, not only for their presentation of the case at the Mayor's second planning hearing, and it was unfortunate we got the wrong result there, and the Mayor and the GLA are determined to ram this through.
Can you ask a question, please?
I am asking the question. I would ask him, would he pass on our thanks to the Council's planning officers and to setting out our detailed reasons to the Secretary of State. They've done that very well, and would he pass on the thanks to that? And secondly, if the Secretary of State civil servants do advise a call-in, will he undertake to continue to put the Council's resources into making the case at a public inquiry against this monstrous proposal? Thank you.
Councillor Thalasides.
The answer is with pleasure, Mr. Mayor. And I also want to thank our local MP, Felicity Buchan, and the GLA member, Tony Devonish, for their campaign to fight this scheme too.
Thank you. We now move to item number 12. Does any member wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11 and speak for up to 2 minutes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Henderson.
Yeah. 12 days to save the Royal Brompton Hospital from oblivion. Can I first of all thank Councillor Thalasides and Councillor Kamali for writing to the board of the Royal Brompton, again asking them to call off the board meeting on December the 15th and to delay their plans to vote the hospital out of existence. Trade unions, local councillors, resident associations, Rita Begum, the West London Assembly candidate, the council, and just under 10,000 people on the petitions are all saying the same thing. So what does it take to get the board to listen? Will it take a public inquiry into the management of the Royal Brompton estate? The last time in this borough, when a board was as belligerent as this one, we ended up with dire consequences. Can I ask the lead members, have the Royal Brompton responded to the letter? What's the view of Matt Hancock, and has his view been sought? What's Greg Hands doing about this? Just for the record, on the 15th of December, the board of the Royal Brompton Hospital will vote to end 100 years of a national institution. Is this a medical excellence decision or one made by property speculation? 12 days to save the Royal Brompton from oblivion. Save the NHS and save the Royal Brompton. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would any other member like to raise an issue? Councillor Rendell?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to raise an issue pertinent to residents of Stanley Ward. Over the past 3 or 4 months, residents of my ward have been denied their mail from Royal Mail, and this extends right from the top of the ward near Markham Street and Kings Road, right down to where the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital is. I've received many complaints from residents all across the ward to state that they're only receiving mail deliveries 2 days a week instead of the statutory requirement of 6 days a week. This is difficult for people, obviously, who are vulnerable, who don't have access to email, who are digitally excluded, who are waiting for medical appointments, and other things that they come through. I've written with our MPs, Greg Hands and Felicity Buchan, who also has part of Stanley Ward in her constituency, to Royal Mail, Royal Mail have advised that deliveries are now 4 days a week, but still not 6 days a week. I'm raising this because for council, because this is not good enough. The statutory requirement is not being met, and I hope that Royal Mail will, ensure that their services are up to speed very, very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chowan, do you wish to raise an issue? Councillor Chowan, do you wish to raise an issue? Councillor Chowan, do you wish to raise an issue?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Can you hear me clearly? Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to raise a matter of local concern about the cycle route along Kensington High Street. As a healthcare worker and a regular cyclist, I, of course, want to see reduced pollution and improved facilities for cycling. I understand people's desire to see better streets, and I've campaigned for new cycle amenities across the borough. That is why I approached plans for the route along Kensington High Street with optimism and an open mind, and wanted to see it work. However, since its introduction, I have heard from many residents and businesses who say that it simply doesn't. I have received more emails about this than any other issue since being elected. Local people are concerned about congestion, pollution, and especially the impact on businesses who rely on loading facilities and servicing access. For that reason, and with a heavy heart, I understand why the council has made the decision to put communities first and to take out the bike lanes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We now move to motions. Members will see that we have 3 motions printed on the agenda. I now call upon motion 1, and members will see that an amendment has been submitted. So I now call upon Councillor Ali to formally move the motion standing in his name.
I beg to move.
Councillor Denko to second.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ali, just to move the motion, to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just give me a second. I just want to get this out. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to start with the background information about the Healthy Homes motion. This motion is as a result of Healthy Homes workshop that I have started earlier this year. I and other members have been dealing with significant housing cases since the beginning of COVID-19. At the workshop, we have not only dealt with the housing issues, we have also dealt with issues including education, youth activities, as well as business rates. Mr. Mayor, you and our members may know that Labour Group has rejoined the scrutiny this year due to COVID-19 emergencies. As a result, I became the chair of the Housing and Community Selection Committee, and after lengthy consultation with our residents, members, and stakeholders, we have established Healthy Homes working.
Sorry, I'm just listening to this quietly.
I wish to take.
Sorry, do you mind if I put this on to charge? I have to.
Councillor Campbell, can you mute your line, please? Thanks. Councillor Ali, please carry on.
Many thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll say that sentence again. Mr. Mayor, as you and our residents may know, the Labour Group have rejoined the scrutiny this year due to COVID-19 emergencies. And as a result, I became the chair of the Housing and Communities Selection Committee. After a lengthy discussion with our members and councillors and the stakeholders, we have established a Healthy Homes working group. I take this opportunity to thank Councillor Greg Hammond for chairing the working group, as well as Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar and also Councillor Tom Pennant for being part of this working group. Mr. Mayor, this is also an open invitation to you and everyone else in the borough as residents to join us at our next selection committee, and that will be one item agenda, and it's repairs, and repairs, because we want to deal with repairs once and for all. And that will be the 7th of December 2020. I hope many members and our residents can be part of that one item agenda to make sure that we give the best possible start of life and repairing the long-term repairs, lack of repairs of our housing. Mr. Mayor, as you may know, our residents have been living in and out of COVID-19 since March 2020 due to the COVID-19 measures taken by the government and to control the spread of the virus. Research evidence shows that the poor housing is causing more health problems for nearly a third of the British communities, and our communities in the borough are being affected unequally by the virus and the measures taken to control its spread. For example, the BAME communities have been hit worst by the pandemic due to poor housing conditions that they're living at, and of course, over COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent lockdown has particularly highlighted the importance of health homes in the borough, a place where we can live, where our residences can call home, a place they can feel safe and secure, and a place the families have the space to live well, work and play whenever they require. Mr. Mayor, this council is on the record committing to making RBKC the best place in the country to work, live and study. But all these important aspects of our lives are happening now in just a confined space where we call home. And I think it's very, very important for this council to take considerable actions now and forward. We recognize houses are not just physical structures, Mr. Mayor, providing shelters that are really much needed shelters, but also we call homes because we bring them our families and we have our loved ones, the ones that are closest to us in our homes. We also seek refuge from the rest of the world. However, Mr. Mayor, a significant number of council homes, housing association and privately rented homes in the borough are not fit for human habitation. And because many of our residents have been dealing with damp, mold, leaks and other unsafe materials. Therefore, this council therefore calls for the current leadership, the lead members for housing, communities and environment to introduce an annual health homes mandatory inspection that this council, for all council homes, housing association and privately rented homes in accordance with the criteria that's agreed, not just consulted with, but agreed with residents and the environmental health. This move will give every child in our borough the best possible start in life.
30 seconds, Councillor Rowley.
Many thanks. I will finish it soon. This will give every opportunity for a very good start for every child in our borough. This will also create a sustainable place for our communities, not just to live, but also to prosper. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, both COVID-19 and Grenfell effects had huge effects on our communities and their housing. I will urge members by voting tonight's motion will give reassurance that our residents that this council is carrying forward an actionable housing policies that's emerging from the COVID-19 crisis as well as a Grenfell. I would urge all members to support this motion. Many thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Dent-Code, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm more than happy to support Councillor Ali's brilliant motion, and I'm very disappointed that the council seems determined to sanitise the intention of it. No, we don't need to just update or titillate social housing. A great deal of social housing, council and housing association, is in a truly appalling state that puts us all to shame. 2 homes I visited about 18 months ago had such bad damp and mold that cloth and leather clothing was actually rotting. If it does that to clothing, what on earth is it doing to their lungs? Air pollution is bad enough without toxic mold at home destroying people's health. Young children with asthma put on steroids don't grow properly. Did you know that, Councillor Taylor-Smith and Thalassides? Unhealthy homes make people ill and not fit for human habitation. So Councillor Ali is giving us an opportunity to tackle this in an evidenced way, which would lead to a positive levelling up in Kensington, Chelsea. And this is very much overdue in the most unequal borough in Britain. My recent inequality report brought health inequalities into sharp focus. This goes hand in hand with poor quality housing. According to the GLA, Golborne Ward is the most deprived ward in London across all measures. How shameful in a borough with a reputation for health, wealth and luxury. And Kensal Town in Golborne is the second most deprived neighbourhood in London after Northumberland Park and Haringey, and it is 13 percentage points worse off than it was in 2010. Health deprivation there is 50%. And please let's not pretend there's no connection with the housing conditions in Kensal Town and health. We know there is. The local doctors tell me so. I see by this attempt to downplay the motion that there's very little understanding of the scale of the problem across the borough. We see it, perhaps you don't, councillors. And frankly, this motion would be unnecessary if social landlords and the council maintained their properties as they should. Just imagine during winter months being stuck in lockdown or otherwise confined at home day after day with damp, mold and cold, and plus your entire family. Many residents are afraid to ask for help, especially our elders, and nearly 57% of elders around Warnington Green live in poverty with accompanying very poor health. The Marmot Review in February revealed worsening life expectancy across the country, but worst of all, and this was confirmed by local doctors I've spoken to, was specifically the poorer neighbourhoods of Goulburn Ward, where life expectancy has reduced by 6 years since 2010, and that is the worst reduction in life expectancy across the country. Other areas of very poor health are Lancaster West, 51%, Henry Dickens, 49%, and there are even worse areas of poor health, Mr. Mayor, with 2 neighbourhoods suffering health deprivation of 60%, and I'll be returning to this in other forum and other times. The council may scoff at these statistics if it wishes and deny there's no connection with unhealthy homes, but let's fight evidence with evidence and not platitudes. If this motion is refused, we'll have to presume that you're afraid of what monitoring may find. So please, without delay, adopt Councillor Ali's motion and set up healthy homes inspections. We can save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dent-Coad. I now call upon the amendment. Councillor Taylor-Smith to formally move and Councillor Thaler-Ceases to second. Councillor Taylor-Smith.
I move, Mr. Mayor. Thank
you.
And yep, and I beg to second.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor-Smith, do you wish to speak to the amendment? Up to 5 minutes, please.
Yes, I do. So this motion is good in its objective, and we don't underestimate the issues that face us. However, I'm afraid I don't agree that this is a brilliant motion, Councillor Dent-Coad, and I think it's ill-thought, ill-timed, and it needs to be amended. First of all, I'll say that the Housing Select Committee has a working party and a questionnaire looking at housing safety and healthy homes. So proposing this motion now with mandatory testing inspections as a solution is premature and a real classic case of putting the proverbial cart before the house. One thing we can all agree on is the importance of ensuring that homes are healthy. However, we do not need a motion to state the obvious. Improving the quality of our homes and leading the way on health and safety are 2 of the 6 strategic priorities that we have within our housing strategy. And the introduction makes it very clear that a safe, secure and affordable home is vital for giving people the best chance in life. And we can show that commitment. We're showing that commitment because we're spending £300 million on a capital improvement programme. There is clear evidence that this council is about action and not words. And I welcome the single topic matter at scrutiny next week on repairs. We've given a report on that and we'll talk to that and the progress that's being made. But the proposed motion fails in its recommendation that an annual healthy homes mandate inspection for all homes in the borough is the effective way of meeting these objectives, let alone a viable one. And this motion fails because it hasn't properly consulted with residents. We've heard from Ian Smith, chairman of Pond Place Residents Association, his view on mandatory visits tonight. But I do give a proverbial big thank you to Councillor Blakeman for canvassing the opinion at the Tenants Consultancy Committee last Wednesday, which exposed what little appetite there would be for this, what people see as a nanny state mandatory inspection that necessitates yet another visit to our residents that they will have to accommodate. And rightly so, you know, our residents ask questions. What is a mandatory healthy homes inspection actually going to inspect? And what is the point of an inspection if you're happy with the home that you live in? And the lack of answers at the meeting confirmed that this motion has not been fully thought through. I think the biggest failure of this motion is that it's simply not financially viable for this council to commit to annual inspections of all properties. Housing management already have welfare checks with council tenants and much more general than the scope outlined in this motion. And this is something that I'm very proud of and something that is far more effective. But we have 88,000 properties in this borough, 39,000 of which are privately rented. And this equates to 39,000 annual inspections. And this is before you consider missed appointments, unless the Labour group are advocating we kick the doors down. And it ignores yet another 16,000 properties that we have owned by housing associations. Now, officers estimate the cost of this motion to the council is between 11 and 14 million pounds every year, and will require over 220 new members of staff to complete it. And I have to say that I'm sure that in the 3 years of doing my job, I've never seen a motion commit to these sort of numbers so transiently without any consideration to the financial position of this council. And it's a financial position the Labour group have acknowledged in their immediate response to our budget. And I very much look forward to Councillor Mason to seeing how this initiative is going to be costed in your alternative budget. But in fairness, I mean, the issue is such an important one, and it does deserve a serious motion. And the amendment does just that. It makes it a serious motion. We do not agree with some of the general sentiments everybody in this borough deserves. Sorry, I do agree with the sentiments of in the motion, because everybody in the borough does deserve a good quality home, no matter what tenure. And as the amendment suggests, our housing strategy commits to lead the way in health and safety, and that commitment is at the heart of everything we do. And we will be inspecting all of our properties annually. But as a third-party properties are concerned, the contribution is going to come from environmental health. And Councillor Johnny Thalasitis is proposing to talk about this. Can you bring your
comments to a close, Councillor Tesman?
Councillor Thalasitis is going to talk about this, and I'll not steal his thunder, so I will conclude, Mr. Mayor, and thank the opposition for bringing the motion on the subject. But I do hope that everybody across the chamber can see how damaging this would be if passed, and therefore support our measured amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thalasitis, do you wish to second?
I do indeed, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Taylor-Smith, for proposing the amendment. I want to, if I may, turn first of all to some of the comments that the former Member of Parliament made in her remarks. She talks about living in housing associations and what life is like in housing association properties. She suggests that majority group councillors have no idea what it's like to live in a housing association. I'm not clear whether she lives in a housing association, but does she realise that I have for all of my life, and that most of my childhood friends were from the estate and from the surrounding estates of Kensington and Chelsea? So there is genuine understanding on this side of the chamber of what it's like to grow up in housing of that nature in our borough. Now, I don't mean to trivialise the issue. You know, I have no doubt that these are serious motions that are being presented and that people want to help. And I completely agree that there are things that we can do to make our homes healthier, to make them safer, to make them more secure. And I commend the work that Councillor Taylor-Smith has already done on this issue. I'm enthusiastic about the discretionary licensing scheme that we're already consulting on. I think that can make progress. And I look forward to recommendations from our working group over the coming months. I want serious answers, not virtue signalling, and that's what this amendment is about. And I hope that colleagues across the chamber will vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor Wade, do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The majority of residents nominated to housing association properties come from council housing lists, and therefore the council should accept their duty of care to ensure that the accommodation provided is safe, secure and appropriate. Housing associations own more stock in the borough than the council, and some are purpose-built, as I think that some of the Peabody estate is, but the majority is actually converted properties and therefore slightly difficult to manage, and the condition is different. And therefore the council will continue to will continue to use housing association stock as the principal provider of affordable homes from the Common Housing Register. Sadly, some housing association units, at least in Earl's Court, do not reflect the standards that we should, as a council, find acceptable. The condition of some of the properties is poor, with damp, lack of heating, noise transmission problems, vermin infestation, fire systems routinely that do not work, coupled with poor management, repairs and haphazard maintenance of their properties being routinely reported. At present, there's a perennial situation of tenants reporting issues to their housing associations, nothing happening, environmental health officers attending, making reports to the associations, enforcement action, and then failures in delay and response. Meanwhile, making some of our more vulnerable residents more vulnerable. So I think the initial motion has very many good intentions, and I welcome many of the comments. But actually, I think that what I would like to see is something where we have a coordinated plan that actually has far more power to make housing associations comply with some of the outcomes of the reports that are generated, which state the condition of their properties is poor. And that could be that we need to provide inspections. So I think that area does need to be examined. If you're in a private block, for example, if you find your landlord is not failing, you could go for a right to manage. And with a housing association, if they fail on their basic duty to provide homes, what are the rights of these residents? So I do appreciate that the council is trying to bulk up on the people that do support housing associations, but I do think considerably more work needs to be done in order to make housing associations far more accountable and actually provide safe, secure, warm and affordable, appropriate homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I hope my change of headset has improved matters.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, jolly good. So I've just got 2 points to make, if I may, Mr. Mayor. And the first one, looking at the second line of the motion, talks about research evidence. And I'm wondering what research this is. I really hope it isn't just a reference to Councillor Dent Code's recycled report, and that it's something other than that, but nothing cited. And perhaps Councillor Ali might like to enlighten us in his summing up speech. The motion in the same paragraph then goes on to state, and I'll just pick out this one point, that BAME communities have been hit worst by the epidemic due to the poor housing conditions and overcrowding. Now, I suspect there's an element of truth in this, and I'm not going to deny that at all, but there's a lot more to it in terms of the experience of the BAME communities in the pandemic, and it's phrased in this motion in a rather simplistic way. First of all, the term BAME lumps together many different minority groups and many different individuals whose experiences will all be different. Furthermore, the experience of the pandemic will have been seriously affected by what sort of jobs people do, with many minority groups doing a disproportionate number of public-facing roles. Larger family sizes and multi-generation households are more prevalent in some minority communities than in the typical white British household. And this is good, of course, for providing a support structure, but it's very bad for passing on illnesses, particularly those that affect older folk disproportionately. And that's regardless of whether or not the building they live in is overcrowded or not. And finally, on BAME issues, there are some underlying illnesses, such as diabetes, that, for reasons I don't understand, are more prevalent in some ethnic groups than others, and which we know can make the experience of COVID much worse. So to blame the disproportionately bad experience of the pandemic of some communities entirely on overcrowding, as this motion does, strikes me as being frankly a bit lazy and poorly researched, even if there is an element of truth in it. But the point should be much more nuanced than it is in this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Dent Coe, do you want to make a point of order there? Can you do that, please, and quite briefly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point of correction, really, for Councillor Thalasites, who's making some comments about me, quite personal comments, which I do object to. Number one, I have actually been homeless. Number two, I lived in a squat for 2 years. I've lived in a tower block, which is hard to let. I then moved into...
Councillor Dencode, I don't think this is a
it's
point of order. So
he was making very personal comments. I now live in social housing. Notting Hill is my landlord, and I've had terrible problems with them in the past. So I just wanted to make a point of correction. He made a very personal comment that I didn't know what I was talking about. Oh my God, I know what I was talking about.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dencode. Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Picking up on your point, Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Taylor-Smith, when he spoke, I think did protest too much. And the reason I know he did protest too much is because he trotted out this figure of 11 million. The aims of the motion would cost 11 million. And I've been here long enough to know that when Conservative chairs or lead members or cabinet members wanted to drive home a point, they always dug up some fantastic figure that later on turned out to be just a fantastic figure or nothing of the kind, because they just wanted to strike down the motion. My God, it's going to cost 11 million more. Now, on the in the case of landlords having the right to enter properties. Well, I live in a Notting Hill Housing Trust property and have done for probably over 25 years. And I can tell you that they will send you letters throughout a year, particularly, of course, for the mandatory gas checks. You have to have one, otherwise they'll take you to court for electricity safety checks, common parts checks, property, they want to look to see the state of the property checks, and they want access to your property. And they want to do that, because they want to keep their properties in good order, because they believe, sometimes quite rightly and sometimes quite wrongly, that some of the residents living in their properties are either doing things to their properties, like making changes, unauthorized changes, or breaching planning law, or not keeping them up to date. And they want to know that their properties, which are under insurance cover, are up to date. And of course, they also want to have properties that are in the best, that are safe, safe accommodation for living and for residents. So I find it odd that whenever I hear a motion struck down because it's going to cost a huge, vast amount of money that somebody drew up on the back of a postage stamp, I know that it's just because they want to bang down the motion. They just don't want to go there, and they may well go there in 6 months' time or next year. You have to have mandatory checks sometimes, because if you didn't have mandatory gas checks, and when we didn't have mandatory gas checks, because they were not always mandatory, Mr. Mayor, there were some people who just wouldn't let anyone in. They said, you don't have any right to come into my property. And of course, during COVID, quite rightly, a lot of people are not allowing people to come into their properties to do all kinds of, and landlords, of course, quite often complying with that. Although I was at a housing Zoom meeting last week. I can't remember which one. I've done about 5 or 6, and I asked the officer, the council officer, and they were talking about doing checks, and they had a graph which said that 96% of their properties had had the mandatory gas checks. And I said, well, that's a fantastic figure. Are you sure during COVID, and this is for this year, I said, are you sure that you're able to get in because of the COVID issues, people shielded, etc.? And they said, well, we have to do these checks. It's for people's safety, and we have insisted, diplomatically, we've insisted, and the people that remain unchecked, we're going to have to obviously take some action to do that. So I don't know what the problem as such is. You know, landlords have got rights to enter properties for all sorts of reasons. Obviously, we don't want them to enter just to walk in and knock your door down and say, I'm coming in now. Like the company did today to me that was delivering a heater. They didn't bother to tell me they were coming. They sent me an email afterwards saying, we came to your property and we couldn't get in. And then they said at the bottom, don't ever miss this appointment again. Bloody cheek. You can imagine what I'm going to say to them. So the amendment makes it sound as if there's going to be a hit squad coming to people's doors to ensure that they have healthy and safe homes, which is absolute nonsense. I think that the council is going to be doing this in a year's time. You just don't want to do it now because it's a Labour councillor that's proposing it, and that's what you do with all the different motions that we put up. You amend them out of existence, and then in a year's time you'll be doing exactly this some way or another. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor
Point of
Hammond,
order.
I'm
Yes.
conscious I might not have come back to you after Councillor Dentcode's point of order.
You
Did you wish
didn't
to finish your speech?
You didn't. I was in the middle of my speech. I thought Councillor Dentcode was going to make a point about me, and she didn't. She was referring.
Can you just
back.
finish your speech, please?
Yes. Well, I did have one more point to make, and I did finish the first one. But my second point is to join Councillor Ali in taking the opportunity to highlight the working group I'm leading from the Housing and Community Select Committee with Councillor Bakhtiar and Councillor Bennett. The subject we were given for this was housing safety and healthy homes. We currently have a call for evidence live, as he mentioned, and I would encourage any listeners to respond by the deadline, which is Sunday night. It's been widely advertised over the last few weeks, and it's deliberately simple with just two substantive questions. What makes you feel unsafe at home? And most relevant for this motion, what makes you feel unhealthy at home? Now, we've deliberately gone for this very broad approach because we wanted to see if it turns up any unpredictable evidence beyond, say, the obvious 5 main physical safety risks, which are fire, asbestos, electricity, water and gas, which the council already has plans to mitigate in its properties. So it'd be very interesting to hear if anything's fallen through the cracks, and that's what we want to hear from residents. It is a bit curious. I agree with my friend Councillor Taylor-Smith that colleagues opposite have chosen this moment to table the motion, given that we haven't had the evidence back of what residents think yet. However, I do look forward to analysing what they say with the working group and taking forward some of the ideas in the rest of the council year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have now finished my speech.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smetterling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that there are health problems exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, I agree that our housing should be a place which our residents can call a home, a place where they can feel safe and secure, that has the space for families in which to live well, work, learn and play, and so on. Now let's look at the numbers involved. I mean, Councillor Taylor-Smith has produced some numbers. Here are mine. I hope they are in agreement, but they're supposed to supplement some of what he said. Council-owned homes, 6,900. Housing associations, 12,900. Subtotal, 19,800. According to the current housing strategy document, there are about 70,000 households in the borough, although Councillor Taylor-Smith this evening actually mentioned a higher number, which will actually would just emphasise what I'm going to say. Anyway, of them, 36% are rented privately outside the housing association sector. That means the private rented sector comprises 25,200 homes. That means a total of 45,000 rented homes in the borough, at least, if not more, according maybe taking into account Councillor Taylor-Smith's numbers. If we assume 48 5-day weeks per year, that means 240 working days. At 3 inspections per day, we would achieve 720 inspections in a year for one inspector. Let's be generous and work on a basis of 5 inspections per day. That would mean 1,200 inspections per year for one person. We have 45,000 homes to inspect at least. Dividing this number by 1,200 gives us 38 inspectors. Whichever way you look at it, it's a very big and expensive team. And you've already heard the kind of numbers, what it would cost. And the numbers I've given are before considering that not every home can be accessed during the day and before an allowance for training days and sickness. And I infer from Ian Smith and the questions from the public, some people may need to be persuaded to allow access, even if it is solely for a safety inspection. Training would be mainly once initially, but there would need to be refreshers, especially for legislative changes and lessons learned. And you've heard how much it could cost from Councillor Taylor-Smith. So once again, I see before me an opposition motion with very worthy sentiments, but completely unrealistic demands. As Councillor Dentcode has highlighted, inspections do need to take place, and they do. And the proposed amendment takes a much more realistic approach. And once again, with great regret, I cannot support the motion as it stands, but I'm very happy to vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to move to the summing up. So, Councillor Taylor-Smith, do you wish to sum up for the amendment, please?
Yes, just very, very briefly, and we could all get our calculators out and work out how much this is going to cost. And I think I've set the challenge already to Councillor Mason within his budget that I look forward to seeing his costed calculation in terms of numbers of people that we need to employ in order to perform these visits. Just reminding him it's 54,000 visits. And that's assuming everybody's in when you turn up at the door. And statistically, what we find within housing management, that you really make about 1.5 appointments for every visit, effectively. So I think, I'm just going to stand on that and wait for him to come back. It is going to cost a lot of money, Pat. That's a simple aspect of that. I think the point I would also like to just pick up on is something that Councillor Wade brought up with regard to the RPs are concerned in terms of how we might make them more accountable. And that is something that we are trying to do. We're trying to deliver those. And it's always within the gift of the residents themselves to phone us up, report where they have disrepair in their buildings. And then we will obviously take action, as Councillor Thalasitis has said, within environmental health. But no further comment from me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ali, do you wish to sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to sum up with, first to start with, I'm sure what Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith meant by all homes. I think that is a correction that he should make. It's not about all homes, it's a council-owned properties. I wish for him, if he wants to come back, he can come back to that and make that corrections. This motion is about council-owned homes and also housing association and privately rented homes. However, the point is, Mr. Mayor, this Conservative-led council is all about the money and not saving human lives. We have started with this meeting by 72 seconds of silence. It's easy for them to stand up and be silent for 72 seconds rather than taking a necessary action and to save lives in advance. I would like to ask the opposite party how much money it will take them to save human lives. How much? There's no money, there's no price for saving and looking after our residents. That is what we've been elected for. And I think for them to think again back when they're quoting 11 million to 14 million pounds per year, think about it, how much one life costs. And I would like to know them about when to tell me the cost of the worth of one human life to be saved. That's one point. The second point that I would like to say to the Councillor Linda Wade. Linda Wade has mentioned is an important issue. This council is failing inspection, its leadership. So when we have the council that's failing to inspect the council homes, the housing association homes, and private rental homes will not do their responsibilities. Therefore, I would like to say this council needs to take the responsibilities and lead where the leadership is required. Then the housing associations and privately rented homes will follow the leadership of the council. But as I can see, the leadership is being felt here. On the case that Councillor Greg Hammond mentioned, I think the problem for many generations and many communities throughout the history of human beings is when one person who has no clue what the community is, what it feels, not one of them, and does not live among them to say something on behalf of other communities. I would like to say this point. As a BAME member of this council, as the only black man in the council, black man, no woman, black man in the council, I know more BAME communities and I know more a lot how they live, how they struggle. I have dealt with more caseworks, housing caseworks, compared to some of the colleagues, their lifetime. I've only been a councillor for just under 2 years. I can claim that simply because the number of caseworks we deal with the north of the borough is huge and significant compared to our colleagues, what they deal with. And I would say to
that area for 8 years.
I would say to this, I wish to not to be interrupted, Mr. Mayor. I wish everyone to be civilized and listen to after I finish my point. They can come in if they wish under the order for the mayor. As Mr. Mayor, I also would like to say to him that he mentioned the research and the lazy research. Of course, no one can say lazy research because I have done the research necessary, and I'm of course happy to say I have been trained at the University College London to do research, which is a world class for research. And I will tell him just a few points. Think about the reports that has been how COVID-19 is impacting the BAME communities, a report that has been published by Public Health England. Go for that report, just to mention for you. The second one is to go another report published by the Imperial College London, our own university, which is our own borough, and understand the point is 14% of overall population of the BAME communities in this country, only 14, but more than triple of that has been affected. Think about it, over a third of our BAME communities have been affected by coronavirus. You cannot tell me that is no reason for that. So please go back to the research and just Google. It will be a lot easier on the numbers. I will conclude, Mr. Mayor. This amendment is just misleading, and this amendment does not want to take the leadership required. If the council and the Conservative-led council would not have done what has happened in the past, making sure our residents' homes are not safe and secure, I wouldn't have been here this evening. I've only joined the council because of what had happened at the Grenfell Tower, and I hope this Conservative-led council will understand the importance of saving human beings, the importance of saving lives. People like me shouldn't be here to talk about saving lives and human health and healthy homes for all.
Thank you, Councillor Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's take the leadership and provide the leadership where it's necessary to be provided. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Ali, I invite you just to clarify one point. Can you please stick to that clarification? Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think I need to read Councillor Ali's motion with regard to.
Can you just clarify?
Yes, I'm just clarifying the motion. The motion reads that it's introducing a healthy annual homes mandatory inspection for all council, housing association, and privately rented homes. That's 54,000 homes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I now propose to move to a
Mr. Mayor.
Vote.
Mr. Mayor, point of order on Councillor Kamali.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I didn't wish to interrupt, even though Standing Order 28 would have allowed me to, as I'm far more polite than the Labour members. I wish to make a point of order under Standing Order 25.02.
Carry on.
I believe Councillor Ali has failed in the duty to not make personal reflections of personal character upon other councillors within the chamber. He has been flippant by describing all Conservative members as not knowing the value of a human life. Absolutely unacceptable. I wish his comments to be retracted. I feel he's brought the council chamber into disrepute.
Sorry, Councillor Hargreaves, I've got a point of order regarding Councillor Thalasides' speech. Exactly the same point of order. I request an apology from Councillor Thalasides if Councillor Kamali is demanding an apology from Councillor Ali.
Oh, thank you.
No,
Can I just say that these? Can I just say I recognise both points of order. I am now going to move to a vote, but can please councillors be very reflective in their speeches? We've had a few comments this evening that have not been very reflective, and I would ask councillors to be mindful of that as we move on. So thank you for those 2 points of order. I now wish to move to a vote. So I'm now going to put the amendment to the vote. Councillor Thalasides, is the Conservative group for or against the amendment?
We are for the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry, is the Labour group for or against the amendment? Or
We are against the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Wade, are you for or against the amendment or abstaining?
For the amendment.
Councillor Palmer, for or against or abstaining?
For the amendment.
Are there any other abstentions or votes not on party lines? I therefore declare the amendment carried. I now put the motion as amended to the vote. Councillor Thalasides, is the Conservative group for or against the motion as amended?
Sorry, we are for the amendment and against the original motion.
Can I ask the question again? Councillor Thalasides, is the Conservative group for or against the motion as amended?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry, is the Labour group for or against the motion as amended or abstaining?
For.
Councillor Wade, for, against or abstaining?
For.
Councillor Mason, for, against or abstaining?
I think you meant Councillor Palmer.
So Councillor Palmer, sorry.
I'm for.
Thank you. Are there any other abstentions or votes not along party lines? I therefore declare the motion as amended carried. Can we now move to motion 2? I now call upon Councillor Evans formally to move the motion standing in her name, and Councillor Chowan to formally second. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and greetings to all my colleagues.
Are you formally proposing it, Councillor Evans?
Okay, sorry, this is my first motion. Yes, I am formally proposing.
My voice went down. I had a statement to make after the last motion, but my computer went down. And if I could just indulge for 2 minutes, or a minute.
1 minute, please.
1 minute, Mr. Mayor. You may know, whoever is the Chief Whip may know or not know, that we do not recognise the next 2 motions as motions in a mandatory sense. We believe the Chief Executive has unilaterally changed the motion rules, was not discussed with us, and which is not acceptable to us. We think they are basically PR statements, as you know, and nobody has discussed this with us. So for the next 2 motions, the Labour Group are going to leave the meeting now, because we're not going to participate in motions that are not motions and that we would not get away with and never got away with in the past. Motions should say some challenge or make some challenge or a statement to have the council actually do something. And these 2 motions, the council's already doing what these statements are saying. So we're going to leave the motion until your Chief Whip or the majority group actually discuss with us and the Chief Executive what the basis of putting motions are, because we have been putting motions on the basis of what.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
For 30 years, and now somebody has changed it unilaterally. So thank you and good night. And somebody needs to come and discuss with us what the basis for the motions are in future, what the standing order really means, because it doesn't mean now what it meant 3 weeks ago or 2 months ago. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Mason. As you know, it is the Mayor's role to decide which motions go forward to a meeting, and I have declared on advice from the Chief Executive and the legal officers that these motions meet the standing orders, and therefore they will continue in this meeting. So thank you. If the Labour Group wish to leave, thank you very much. I now move to motion number 2. Councillor Evans, going to come back to that. Do you wish to formally propose the motion, and Councillor Chowan to formally second the motion?
Yes, I propose the motion. Thank you.
I'd like to second motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, you now have up to 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and greetings to my colleagues. I would like to join the lead member, Elizabeth Campbell, in thanking all officers, RBKC workers, lead members who have done a magnificent job during this COVID pandemic. As we know, it is not the size of the motion that matters. It is what you do with it. It is okay not to be okay. This is the first step for recognizing that we are witnessing a mental health crisis exacerbated by this global pandemic, which has hit our borough. There used to be 3 crises in life that triggered depression: death, disease, and divorce. And some people would say paying taxes. We now have many more reasons for causing mental health problems, and they are affecting everyone in our community. Yes, you and me, our residents, friends and neighbors, rich and poor. Due to no fault of their own, people are experiencing many life crises, and all at once. Loss of loved ones, loss of livelihoods, loss of homes, decimation of savings, divorce, alcoholism, drug abuse, relapses. Lack of physical contact, limited opportunities to see family and friends. Canceled holidays, miscarriages, domestic abuse. Screens have replaced human contact. In many cases, pornography has replaced dating, and social isolation has led to extreme loneliness and alienation. In our motion, we are asking the council to review mental health provision in the borough. RBKC has excellent provision for mental health. We have 23 mental services available to our community. But the problem is not what it was 2 years ago. It is not what it was last year. Our Family Services Select Committee is focusing on new areas of scrutiny which have been affected by our population. We will be investigating domestic abuse. We have appointed Councillor Charles Williams to coordinate between our committee and the Adult Social Care and Health Select Committees. Both committees are concerned with treatment, causes, and prevention of suicide. I ask all committees to try to work together in order to cover many issues at once and for expediency. We are asking the Council, with its extensive by-borough mental health provision, to refocus and review mental health provision. We must target these issues, and we must pay attention to re-ablement to help those who have suffered mental health crises to re-enter the community through confidence building and teaching resilience and life skills. We can do this through coaching, buddying, and being a go-to person when needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chowan, do you wish to second? Yeah. Councillor Chowan, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I wish to second the motion. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Councillor Evans for bringing this important motion to Council. I've listened to her words very carefully, and they resonate with me, especially from my own experience during the coronavirus pandemic. And what I'm about to say is basically about my personal experience and how I've supported one particular family from this borough, and how we can all do the same going forwards as we look for the call to action that she's just outlined. Over the last 8 months, I've actively redeployed to various roles in the NHS. During this time, and more so than any other, the well-being and therefore the mental health of those around me has been at the forefront of my mind. I have trained staff that have never worked in hospitals who have had to learn to put on full personal protective equipment, but also how to put on what is called psychological PPE. This is the psychological preparation they have to go through prior to each shift to protect themselves for the personal stresses in dealing with the consequences of the worst possible outcome for the patients being cared for. During this time, I have also worked in intensive care units as a clinician and helped develop communications teams so that families and friends could communicate with their loved ones during the visiting restrictions that were in place. This was a difficult time. The simple use of FaceTime technology allowed vital contact to patients that were ventilated, but could possibly hear their families, and when they were extubated, to see them. I have seen many patients with COVID-19 pull through with that moral support mediated through this innovation, an innovation that Councillor Evans has referred to. I recall one particular family from this very borough that benefited from this and allowed them to sing songs, play music, pray for a speedy recovery, and for telling their loved ones they were missed and that they should come home soon. After that call, I also saw the effect seeing their family member in intensive care had on them, and asked if they needed support as well. I arranged access to the wellbeing teams and other services, and our website has good references on them. I have seen how mental health is not isolated to others. It creeps up unseen in us all, especially in those that are well, but supporting those that aren't. If you detect a person in our community who might be struggling with the current situation or are worried about symptoms of poor mental health, you should advise them to talk to an education, health, or social care professional, who will then refer to a specialist mental health support services to offer appropriate support. You can also refer to our website, as I've just mentioned, to find out what can be done to improve mental health and well-being. It is everyone's responsibility to look out for each other and to be able to identify signs of mental health problems. These counsellors work hard, as we can see by the existing resources and capabilities for mental health provision, given the experiences of the last few years. However, we can improve further, as Councillor Evans has called for, by innovative use of technology. I also look forward to the recommendations from the joint working group on mental health by both of our select committees to learn lessons, as Councillor Evans has said, from the past 8 months to improve future services. Mr. Mayor, I commend this motion to the Chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have for some years been the Council's representative on the governing body of Central and North West London Foundation Trust, which provides mental health services in the borough. And as the two previous speakers have said, I have been charged by the scrutiny committees, select committees, to lead a working group, the other members being Councillors Idris and Atkinson, which is examining mental health services in North Kensington. And we will shortly go out with a call for evidence. I would also like to refer to the Appleby report on suicide prevention following the Grenfell fire. This was commissioned by CNWL, and they published it in September, along with a summary saying that they welcomed it. We do, though, need to see a plan of action following Appleby from not only CNWL, but also from this council and perhaps very important to the CCG, because primary health services play a key role in mental health services. So I think we need to consider the best way of taking this forward in scrutiny. It may well be through our working group, but also, as Councillor Blakeman suggested, I think the best way may well be for the full select committee to have a special session on the Appleby report. And before that happens, we will need to hear from the various public bodies about what their coordinated response is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Durian, do you wish to speak, please?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. And before I say anything else, I'd just like to express my disappointment at the decision of the minority party to withdraw from contributing to this timely and important motion. Mr. Mayor, a few days ago, I heard from an elderly resident living alone who, after making his inquiry, gently admitted that he had been struggling a little to stay positive during this latest lockdown. And no doubt other members will have had similar conversations with residents during the course of this difficult year. In this case, happily, the gentleman had found some constructive ways to occupy himself and keep his mind busy, realizing that if he didn't, he risked going down what can often be a deadly spiral. Mr. Mayor, that realization isn't always obvious. We usually know sooner or later when something is wrong with us physically. We get a cold, dare I say, a virus, suffer an injury, have symptoms that don't go away. We know when we need to get suitable relief or treatment. We know we need to go to the pharmacy, the GP, the hospital. With mental health, it is less simple. You don't always know there is something wrong, that a bad or low mood has tipped over into something more serious, that everyday feelings, behaviors, or actions that for you have become entirely normal are in fact quite the opposite to those around you. And of course, the distinction between mental and physical health isn't a perfect one. Poor physical health can lead to an increased risk of mental health problems, and poor mental health often leads to an impact on physical health, with an increased risk of some conditions. And one of these, sadly, is an increased risk of substance abuse and addiction, with all the social consequences that follow, as well as the pressure on the NHS, police, and of course, council services. So I am entirely in favour of this comprehensive review of mental health support across the borough as proposed again by Councillor Evans' very timely motion. In Earls Court specifically, we have had a long concentration of support services for those recovering from severe mental health and addiction issues. And often the reports that I hear as a ward councillor are those of other residents, such as Jack Pitsey, whom we heard from at the start of the meeting, whose lives become affected by the behaviour of individuals who are still struggling through that recovery. Councillor Spalding has raised a formal councillor call to action at the Adult Health and Social Care Select Committee to fully review and report back on this issue with respect to Earls Court, and I certainly look forward to contributing to that and to any wider review. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Siren, do you wish to speak? Councillor Siren, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this timely motion. And I too am pretty disappointed that the opposition councillors have decided not to listen to this debate. COVID has affected every individual, every family and every community in our borough. For those who are already suffering from anxiety and depression, this pandemic has exacerbated those negative feelings and worse, stressed some of the lifelines and support systems which were in place to support our residents. Mr. Mayor, there is no health without mental health, and this council must do all it can to support our communities in response to COVID and eventually, soon, strengthen resilience and hope for recovery. How will we do this, Mr. Mayor? In addition to the robust social services and support systems this council provides, my strong belief is that we can only address the mental health challenges that face our communities in partnership with local community groups, voluntary organisations, schools, the NHS, partners that are on the ground who know their members and clients. I would like to record my thanks to all of those groups, charities and partners who have worked with such dedication and compassion on the response. But as we move forward, there is certainly a need to review mental health support across the borough, jointly with these organisations. We need to trust those set up to support some of our more deprived and vulnerable residents, to help us identify those who are in need. They know their members better than we do. They can see who has not been able to weather this pandemic. They also know what their communities need to thrive. We must trust those specialist voluntary organisations such as SMART, Mind, KNC and Hestia, who are established to support mental health in our borough. They have the local knowledge and experience of best practice. This council has already successfully piloted the Community Living Well service, which is funded by West London CCG, supported by GPs in partnership with SMART, who are delivering the wellbeing support, and Mind, who deliver peer support. This pilot, now embedded in our service provision, provides therapies targeting those with complex mental health needs, alongside a suite of other services, often linked to anxiety, such as debt management and housing advice. The service is further supported by community organisations who deliver an annual programme of self-help activities, providing an innovative approach to emotional resilience and prevention. We are one of only maybe 14 locations in the UK to pilot such an integrated service. This puts local residents at the heart of the service, making best use of resources and reducing pressure on our more expensive and overstretched secondary care services. This is the key to success. We must work to support healing before residents enter mainstream mental health services. Mr. Mayor, what this really describes is co-production, something many talk about, but which we are now starting to really understand and practice. Community Living Well is a great example of co-production and must be the template for the future. Our new mental health hub, which will also be delivered in partnership with SMART, is another example. By working with our voluntary and community sector partners, we can ensure that co-production is at the heart of our mental health response so that people get what they need, which is evidence-based interventions in a way that they want it delivered. This is why we've invested in our voluntary sector, particularly through our core grants programme, and particularly in our 3 main mental health charities through our contracting arrangements. We must truly partner with them now to co-produce and innovate in this area, which now rightly demands so much of our attention. Mr. Mayor, there are huge challenges ahead of us. There are many important lessons from the tragedy of Grenfell. One of the legacies of that disaster must be that faced with another emergency, we respond better. Our local organisations, partners and faith groups responded to Grenfell and trust was placed in them. This council will remember that and will work in partnership with our voluntary and community groups to inform the recovery and mental health provision as we look to the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodger, do you wish to speak?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You can hear me. Okay. This year has been a strange and lonely one for many of our residents who live in single dwellings, including myself. You can literally see on my lockdown beard growth face. Many gentlemen in the borough will now resemble Tom Hanks in Castaway. It's like being on a desert island in your own home. But all facial hair jokes aside, I want to draw attention to that feeling of isolation. Remember that we're not alone. A friendly face on Zoom, a familiar voice down the phone, or a walk in the park seeing a friend. Health is not just physical, it's mental too. So let's look out for our residents, particularly those who are not able to reach out. So we need to make sure we reach out to them. Minds do matter. I'm pleased to speak in support of this motion on the importance of looking after mental health for all our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Addenbrook, I can squeeze in one more speaker on this if you can be fairly swift, please. Councillor Addenbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be. I very much welcome the timing of this motion, and I'm very sorry that our Labour colleagues have left the meeting. Prior to the pandemic, we knew that mental health starts early in life. Half of all mental health problems have been established by the age of 14, rising to 75% by the age of 24. A shocking statistic. This pandemic has brought additional challenges to our residents, with children missing schooling, some have lost their jobs, some have lost livelihoods, and some their sense of purpose in life. Many are suffering from anxiety, isolation, and loneliness, and we should not underestimate the impact of the pandemic on people's lives and their mental health and well-being. Now more than ever, we must not forget the lessons learned from Grenfell, particularly around community commissioning, which establishes and responds to actual need. This has included a range of targeted support from a group of providers, ensuring services are as inclusive as possible and are accessible to harder to reach groups such as BAME, men and older people. We have also seen how peer support programmes can help and build resilience in the community, and work is ongoing to expand these programmes. With young Grenfell, we saw how they developed techniques and coping strategies through group therapy, including talking, art, creating books and memories of their lost friends and families. This was so successful, its members have all become NHS ambassadors, and now, having learnt these life skills, support others in the community. Mr. Mayor, one of the priorities of the NHS long-term plan is to improve people's mental health and well-being, and also to address the mental health services for children and young people. Public health, adults, children's services, and community engagement need to continue to work in partnership with the NHS, the voluntary sector, and our communities to address health inequalities and improve the health and well-being of our residents. We need to do all we can to avoid children and adults going into crisis. We know young people face a cliff edge at 18, and I hope the work on transitions that was started prior to the pandemic will be reviewed and continued. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kamali, as lead member, do you wish to briefly sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm aware of the time. So I just really wish to say, obviously, incredibly disappointed to see that a third of the chamber have decided not to attend what is clearly an important issue, an issue they could have amended if they so chose. I think hearing here tonight, you can really understand how every councillor who remains in the meeting is fully committed to making sure that the issues of mental health are tackled seriously, properly, and with new innovative ways, as we've learned through COVID that there are new ways of doing things. It is absolutely right that we review the services we offer. We have to make absolutely sure we are dealing with people who in the past may not have needed our help, and we have to reach out to them and find them wherever they may be. This is why this motion is so important, because the old ways, good that they are, need to be looked at from time to time, especially with such a widely recognized mental health crisis that we are watching the beginnings of come to pass. It is totally unacceptable that the opposition group refused to engage on this matter, as they represent some of the most deprived wards in this borough, and we have to have everybody working together to make sure that we tackle mental health in a really positive way so that we don't need to review it again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really disappointed, I'm afraid. Thank you very much.
Councillor Evans, you have a right to sum up, but I need to get the vote in before 9:30. So do you wish to sum up, or can we move to the vote?
I will be very quick. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all the councillors for their support. I think it shows that we are a council of substance. As a council, I call on all councillors to work together for a review and a refocus of a mental health provision. There is an urgent need for an updated mental support, and that is what has come out of this meeting. Depression does not discriminate. It can affect the entire borough. There is good news. The UK is the first country to roll out the vaccine, so let's hang in there. Let's reach out to one another and get through this. And we ask the council to review, refocus, and update, and make it fit for purpose, and that will help get us all through this mental health crisis. We must join together and co-produce from grassroots level up to scrutiny and leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now put the motion to the vote. Councillor Thalasitis, is a Conservative group for or against the motion?
We are for the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. I know the Labour group have opted out, but I am going to ask Councillor Lowry, is the Labour group for or against the motion, or abstaining?
There you are. They're speaking.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wade, are you for or against the motion, or abstaining?
For the motion.
Councillor Palmer, are you for or against the motion, or abstaining?
For the motion.
Are there any other abstentions or votes not along party lines? I therefore declare the motion carried. So in accordance with Standing Order 2401, we are now approaching 9:30 and the Council will have been sitting for 3 hours. I'd like to ask the whips, my proposal is to defer the remaining motion to be dealt with at the following meeting. Whips, is that agreeable to yourselves?
Yep, absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lowry, I don't know if you are still with us. This is about the council business rather than the motion. Okay, I will therefore propose.
Left. I think they actually left.
Thank you. I therefore announce that motion will be carried over to the next council meeting. Appointments to committees and outside organisations. I have no nominations. Are there any nominations from the whips? Thank you very much.
No, there aren't.
Thank you. Can I just, I sent an email out a couple of days ago about the Mayor's Christmas Carol concert on the 15th of December, which is for my chosen charity Glassdoor. I would love to see all councillors there and encourage you to come if you can possibly do on the 15th. Thank you. So this concludes the business of this evening's meeting of the Council. The next meeting of the Council is scheduled to be held on the 27th of January. Good evening, and if it's not too early, I wish you a very happy Christmas and a very safe and promising new year. Thank you.
Ditto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Bye all. Bye.
And happy Christmas to everyone else.
Yeah, of course. Happy Christmas. If I don't see you again.
Best wishes and good night from Dory.